Okay, since we're all good, I'll call to order the Thursday, December 16th, 2021 College Township Regular Council Meeting. Before we get into the agenda, I'm going to ask everybody who can stand to please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we go to public open discussion, the chair would like to note that this council met in executive session at 6:30 prior to this meeting to discuss a personnel issue. It's one of the topics that the Pennsylvania Sunshine Law allows to be discussed in executive session. So that takes us to public open discussion. It's an opportunity for anybody on council first, and then in the audience to approach council with anything that's not already on tonight's agenda. Paul or Anthony? No. Rich or Carla?
No.
Okay. Anybody here in the audience for anything that's not already on tonight's agenda? Okay. Anybody participating remotely, would like to address council on something that's not already on tonight's agenda? If you would, just use the raised hand feature. Let us know. I'll give you a couple more seconds. If you can't find the raised hand feature, just holler on out. I'll recognize you. Okay. That concludes public open discussion. That takes us to plans. Tonight we have one plan, P1, Millbrook Marsh Nature Center Land Development Plan. Is somebody here?
Yes.
Are you with Sol Schaefer?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Are you Jeff?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So Jeff, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Jeff Balkin. I'm the project manager for Sol Schaefer. We're assisting Center Parks with putting together the land development plan for the Millbrook Marsh project. I think everybody might be familiar with the project, but just a real quick overview. It's a phase 2 development of the Spring Creek Educational Building at the Millbrook Marsh Center. It also includes the construction of a welcome pavilion that has some restroom facilities in that as well. The project, the land development plan itself went in front of Planning Commission on November 16th, and we did get some conditional approval through Planning Commission at that meeting. There were some additional comments that need to be addressed as far as the land development plan goes itself. We have made most of those revisions as recommended by the Planning Commission. There were some additional comments that were received on Monday from Lindsay that I went through and did respond to those today and sent that over to Linda, but Dawn said that information did not make it back into your packets for tonight's meeting, so I apologize for that. There is one area based on the recommendation from Planning Commission to Council that we did want to try to have a discussion with, if possible, would be the use of the trail surface aggregate on the trail network within the park. As it's proposed right now, the whole network throughout the Millbrook Marsh Center was approved as an alternate to the sidewalk requirement for the ordinance. Along with that, we were proposing to upgrade the existing trail leading into the Welcome Pavilion. There was a couple areas just on the north side of the facility or the center itself that had some grass growing through the existing trail. Basically, it's a maintenance item that we want to go through and upgrade the trail surface in those areas, as well as new construction around the Welcome Pavilion itself. I know that Planning Commission had a strong conviction on that surface of the sidewalk being either asphalt or concrete. But we do believe that based on information that's been presented by Penn State's Dirt Gravel Roads Center, as well as some other technical bulletins, that the trail surface aggregate is an acceptable surface that meets ADA compliance requirements. That was a concern of the Planning Commission, as well as some of the hardness issues that I think lends itself to using asphalt or concrete. So the TSA itself does, in our opinion, kind of fall in line with the requirements of an asphalt type surface. So, like I mentioned, I know Planning Commission is recommending that trail surface aggregate not be allowable. But based on, like I said, the Penn State Dirt Gravel Roads Center, as well as some additional research information, technical bulletins of the such, that that should be permissible given the application for the Nature Center and the history of the Millbrook Marsh Nature Center as a whole. Coupled with that, this is really not like a Walmart type application, a Sheets type application. The application, trail surface being used across the board, I don't think is appropriate, but giving the center and the functionality of the Millbrook Marsh Center, I do believe that it does warrant being utilized in this case. Going on further, I know there were some lighting concerns at the entrance into the parking area. We have addressed those. Those will be in the final plan submission once we go through and make sure that we capture all the comments that Dawn and Lindsay has from a planning standpoint. But I just did want to bring the attention of the use of the trail surface aggregate. We're requesting that the plan be approved with the making sure that all the comments are addressed as per Planning Commission, with the exception of being able to utilize the trail surface aggregate within the park itself as presented on the plan. So if there's any other questions or anything along those lines, I'll be happy to try my best in answering them. But I believe that is all that I have to offer for this evening.
Okay, Jeff, thanks. Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time we're seeing this, right?
That's the first time for council.
For
that's
council,
all right.
yeah. Jeff, do me a favor.
Yeah.
Since this is the first time we're seeing it, we kind of focused on the items that were around conditional approval. Can you give us a very brief overview of the project?
Yes, absolutely.
And then follow that up with, if you could tie in visually the references here to where the sidewalk would have been required. So what you're asking for is the waiver, and where the alternate is going, which is part of the condition. And then I think you covered the aggregate part pretty clearly.
Yeah, so as far as the overall project, so this building here is the Phase 2 educational building that is being proposed as the main component of the project itself. A portion of this was already through land development as a Phase 1, and for funding issues, that second building was not constructed at that time. So the main objective is constructing that educational building at the north end of the parcel. Also included is the Welcome Pavilion, which has restroom facilities down adjacent to and just off of the parking area that's already existing. This is a gravel parking area. The main portion of the center, Millbrook Marsh Center, that is not going to be, involved in this project, is pretty much central located to the parcel. Connecting from north through south is this series of gravel trails. So there's some just off the page. This ties into there's a wooden pedestrian building or bridge that's just adjacent to Puddingtown Road. So that trail network ties into that wooden pedestrian bridge, comes southward, goes off towards the Phase 2 portion of the building, also comes down. There's some other networks in here in front of the barn, continues southward, and eventually ties into the existing side or parking area that's at the southern end of the parcel. So along with building those two buildings, the other portion of the project is going to include utility runs to the Welcome Pavilion, these dark areas are upgrades to the existing trail network. So you have a section here that's leading into the Welcome Pavilion. There's an extension piece that was requested to tie to the end of the parcel. And then this section up here would be a maintenance portion of existing trail to upgrade the surface of that trail. There's a light that is now proposed at the entrance to the parking area. And this area that is just below that is the tie-in for the sewer utility that's going to go to the Welcome Pavilion. That, for a nutshell, is the entire project and what was involved in the complete project for the Welcome Center and educational building.
Okay, so what would have been required for sidewalk, and what were you proposing that the
So by
Planning Commission has accepted?
Sure, so by ordinance, there should have been a sidewalk that would have been adjacent to Puddingtown Road along the frontage of the entire parcel. There is allowance for doing an alternative sidewalk to that requirement. What we are proposing, or what was proposed, is since there was already a trail network through the central corridor of the entire parcel, that we were going to extend that piece to tie into the end of the parcel to meet the requirement, but rather than it running along Puddingtown Road, it would be internal to the parcel. So the alternative, or the suggested alternative, was rather, in lieu of running that sidewalk adjacent to Puddingtown Road, it was going to utilize the existing trail network that is already through the facility. Because it is a gravel surface currently, and it was mostly doing maintenance on a couple portions and upgrading this piece down to the parking area, there was a need from Center Parks that we would just continue with the trail surface for consistency's sake. Planning was wanting us to, they were okay with the alternate sidewalk as being run through the middle of the parcel. However, they wanted that surface material to be hard, where it was either asphalt or concrete. But given the nature of the park, like I mentioned earlier, we still believe that the TSA, one, meets the need of a hard surface, and as well as stays consistent with it being a natural type trail setting through the Millbrook Marsh Center.
Okay, and then I suspect maybe, Lindsay, that some of the comments that came out after Planning Commission were related to the,
Lighting and.
okay, anything related to the surface?
Yeah, we did discuss that. That's something that I just was going to leave up to council. So that was something that we were leaving up to council, that and the waiver request for lighting.
Okay, so in summary, you would prefer to stick with the aggregate.
Yes, absolutely.
Planning Commission would prefer something harder.
Yes, and I guess my comment to that would be the TSA, the trail surface aggregate, although it is not as hard as asphalt or concrete, it is very dense, and it acts as asphalt would given this application, and it is ADA compliant. So as far as any issues with those concerns, there would be none.
Okay, before we open up for questions, was it clear to Planning Commission that the structure of this asphalt, or this, was that dense?
Yes, we gave it the technical bulletin from Penn State to justify, because it was an initial comment from planning before we went to Planning Commission. And as part of the response to the original comment was the technical bulletin and the information regarding the density and application and how TSA, kind of the look and feel of TSA and its proper use given.
Okay.
You know.
All right, one last comment then.
Yep.
I understand, sympathize with that, because I have a compacted gravel path access into my neighborhood park, and there's weeds growing up through the middle of it, and you definitely can't plow it. So, Adam?
Well, that,
This is different, though,
Yes,
apparently.
it is. Yeah, with it.
one of the issues, as I understand it, had to deal with winter maintenance.
Yes.
And that was an area that the planning commission concentrated on quite a bit. And again, as has been very thoroughly described, normally you would have a sidewalk that would be running parallel to the actual roadway network. And in this case, it's an alternate, and the planning commission was okay as an alternate sidewalk
Correct.
location. But again, in keeping with a normal sidewalk condition, sidewalks need to be able to be maintained. And I think that the concept or some of the conversation relative to the hardness of the material that was going to be used in the trail had to do with the potential for winter maintenance if it was going to be treated in a similar fashion as a sidewalk. So I think that is one of the other considerations was clearly the winter maintenance suitability, capability of a proposed TSA versus an asphalt or a concrete.
Right.
Asphalt and concrete can be plowed or brushed or et cetera, and perhaps TSA can as well, but again, I think that was kind of the crux of some of that discussion.
Correct, and there was some discussion during the planning commission meeting along those same lines, and that was a comment that was to be added to the plan, which has been as far as being able to maintain 12 months out of the year, the trail network, sidewalk, whatever you want to call it, throughout the facility year-round. That note has been added. There was some discussion as well as Millbrook Marsh did not have a need to clear all of that area up until now, realistically. But if this does get approved, they do not have an issue of maintaining, the trail through the winter months, year-round. It's just something they didn't have to do up until now. And so I don't know if that's a real, I know it's a concern, but I don't know if it's a concern, a legitimate concern, because it can be done. I know that I remember asking a question, if it was just a note to add onto the plan to be able to satisfy the winter maintenance concerns, would we still be able to, use the TSA from a planning commission standpoint, and that was not well received. So I think what I keep getting back to is giving the location of where this facility is, how it functions and how it forms, the use of TSA still fits for the way that center is, being a nature center.
Okay. Lindsay and Dawn, anything to add? And then I see that Pam and Kathy are...
Well, yeah, the one thing I'd like to point out is if you're familiar with the gravel paths of the past, there used to be the ADA stone was called an ash tone number 10, which rolled in pretty nice and wasn't a bad material. And then 15 years ago, Penn State worked and developed the TSA, which is far superior to the ash tone number 10. But I think, as pointed out, in the winter, you're plowing a much better gravel, but it's still a gravel. So I'd be concerned that you'd end up with piles of gravel in the winter. But no, the TSA was a great advancement with gravel, for gravel paths. And when they're flat like this is going to be down there, they can stay really nice for years without any maintenance requirements. But the winter maintenance may beat it up a bit.
Yeah, there's no doubt. It is a gravel surface. So winter maintenance would be, not be as easy as asphalt, but at the same time, the center is going to be required to do maintenance on that trail network regardless. Being able to keep it clear, and like Dawn's saying, if there's windrows of gravel, after the winter months, then that's going to be part of the routine maintenance that's required by them to do anyway. So I wouldn't want to have that prohibit the use of that just because it may be, not as easy to do as something else. It's still a viable surface type to meet the needs of the purpose, and that just ends up being a maintenance issue for the center to maintain year-round, which is they're going to be required to do anyway.
Lindsay?
Yeah, a lot of the discussion the planning commission had, they were sort of torn because it was either put the alternate path through Millbrook Marsh or build the sidewalk. And it was either, okay, so you put the path through and you pave it or you use asphalt, or you put it along Puddintown Road. And then the whole maintenance issue came up because typically you wouldn't maintain through the park, but if it was one of our sidewalks, then yes, you would have to maintain it. So that was one of the bigger discussions as well. And ultimately, they did say that, like I said, put it through, pave it, or put it along Puddintown Road.
Okay. Pam or Kathy, did you want to add anything to the presentation before we open it up to staff?
Sure.
And then offer Ed an opportunity.
Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Pam Salakangas, Center Region Parks and Recreation Director. I just want to add on to what JP was saying regarding maintenance. We do have to maintain the facility now in the winter months because we are a year-round facility. So we have a gravel parking lot and our staff does clear that parking lot, and we do have to clear some of the current TSA trails there because they lead from the parking lot to the Spring Creek Education Building and the barn, which is where we have programming, sometimes in the pavilion in the winter as well. So we knew in this discussion leading up to presenting to council, we talked a lot about maintaining that trail from the parking lot across the bridge where it meets the shared use path. And so we are prepared to do that. We talked about how quickly we are going to need to react because we want to avoid snowpack. So we are prepared to maintain that, especially once the Spring Creek Education Building Phase 2 opens. We're going to have increased traffic there, increased use. So it is going to need to be a careful consideration. So our team is prepared to handle that.
Okay. Kathy, anything? Ed, having heard the discussion, was it accurately captured, would you say? I'll need you to step up here. Anything to offer before we open this up for discussion?
Yeah, basically the planning commission looked at the linear square feet that we would be saving them and also the cost. So basically if you went from the edge of their property all the way around Puddintown Road to the bridge with a sidewalk that's required by ordinance, the cost would be very steep for. So we looked at the alternative path and we basically said we wanted hard surface, not concrete. They could do macadam, that'd be great. It won't really detract from the center and it won't detract from the marsh. But it's going to connect all the way down and have an alternative feel for it. And I think anybody that's using that, because I know in our later discussion today on our pedestrian master plan, they're having complaints about no sidewalk along that part of Puddintown Road. So this alternative, and with the winter conditions, we felt that the hard surface would be better than the trail mix. And we were also given brochures concerning that, what the mix is, and the planning commission was very much in favor of a hard surface.
Okay.
As well as the lighting.
Okay, Jeff, hang loose here while we open up the discussion.
Okay, I want to add one more thing, just kind of couples with what was just said. The concern that I do have, if required to use an asphalt surface, is we got ENS plan approval on Monday based on the use of TSA. That was submitted whenever the land development submission was made. That came back on Monday. My concern is once we change the type of surface, that changes essentially, it doesn't change the use, but it now requires us to change and verify design. So we're at a 6-foot wide trail right now existing. That's why those upper areas, and we're just kind of picking and choosing what is being updated by maintenance because we are not required to do anything with design. Once we have to go to an asphalt surface, we need to look and verify design, which right now we go to an 8-foot wide at a minimum asphalt sidewalk. So we just made a comment about, saving costs. I don't know if there's going to be a huge cost savings when we have to redesign and go with additional width for that trail network through the central part of the parcel. Along with that, we'll have to go back through E&S approval, most likely planning commission approval, to make sure that we get everything up to design standard from that standpoint. So, not saying it can't be done. It's going to be more time and effort to do so. And, like I said earlier, given where we're at and the intent, I don't know if that's really the proper thing to do, given this.
Okay, understood. Let's gather thoughts around the table here. Anthony, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, thank you for the presentation. One of the things that I was looking at, and I couldn't find it, I don't know if staff can help. So when we looked at phase 1 and the waiver that we gave for phase 1, was there a caveat that the next phase, what was the requirement for sidewalk there?
Actually,
I don't think there was.
there wasn't a specific
Yeah.
requirement. My recollection is that the type of configuration that's being shown on this plan was actually contemplated along with the waiver that was granted as part of the phase 1 project. Now, I could be mistaken on that, but I recall that for quite some time, this, at the edge of the property, at the bottom of the page here on the screen, that this configuration had been at least contemplated for quite some time. So, I don't think that that's a great answer to your question, but I do believe that as part of phase 1, there had been a preliminary alignment or how it might work. And I do believe even at that point, we had contemplated the potential for utilizing the original trail system, recognizing some of the difficulties going down Puddintown Road. Certainly length and cost were an issue. One of the bigger issues, I think, for staff, and we talked about it again, in conjunction with this phase of the project, is the sidewalk around the curve here right across from the dairy, and that is a somewhat difficult and dangerous location, and I'm not certain that, from a staff perspective, that we felt that made an awful lot of sense to create a sidewalk with that type of a potential condition. When there was at least another viable alternative that was existing.
You're talking about this plan or the previous plan?
Well, now I'm sorry, I
talking about
switched
this plan.
midstream.
Yeah.
I was talking about
So
this plan.
on the first, and that's where I couldn't find the first plan to see if there was a note put on there that if it was waived and then looked at again in phase 2, or the next development, it should be built. And I don't know if there was that caveat there, because usually that's what we've done in the past when we've had waivers. The next development would be a requirement of a sidewalk. So I'm just starting there. And going back to understanding utilizing the current and existing would be ideal. But if we do that, to the earlier comment, what we're going to be revisiting tonight, again, from a pedestrian master plan, it is an area that folks want to be able to walk. So connectivity is important. If it's a hard surface, unfortunately, if you applied for the permit in advance without knowing what was there, then that would need to be done to do it again and go from that, if this would be the alternative from that standpoint. I'm just looking at it from a connectivity plan issue. This is an area that we're looking to have some public connectivity and pedestrian walkway. This is the second time that we're looking at it, and second time it's coming before us with a waiver, although with an alternative path as opposed to the waiver. We can lose an opportunity here from that standpoint. I did review Planning Commission's comments and how they looked at everything there, and I think they looked at it as if how we're looking at the master pedestrian plan. What's the cost of what would be the current ordinance and where their savings is from a linear square foot, and they did look at it that way. I'd like to hear other comments, but that's where I stand on that.
Okay, Paul, and then we'll come back over here to Carla and Rich.
Oh,
Lindsay?
Anthony.
Yeah.
So when the planning commission was discussing this, Ray Forziat brought that up. He said when phase one came in front of them, they waived sidewalks. I'm looking now on the plan to see if there is a note, but he did mention that and said, do we want to correct that now with this opportunity to put in sidewalks? So he did acknowledge that the waiver was done before for phase one. So you guys are sort of on the same page with that.
Yeah, I just didn't know if we had something put on that plan, because when we, usually when we do that and we approve a
I don't remember there
waiver, we
being.
have something put on the plan, and I couldn't find it on the plan, that's why I was asking. Thank you.
Rich?
Yeah, my recollection is that we didn't put a note on the plan and everything, but just confirming, so the waiver would have stood if no other activity occurred. But now additional activity is occurring and the discussion begins again.
Correct.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Paul?
Yeah, there's a lot going on here, right? I mean, there's cost issues, there's environmental concerns, maintenance issues, but I guess the question is, right now, is it considered a connection to the bike path along Puddintown Road? Because right now, I don't think it's at all clear to pedestrians or to anybody on a bike that there is a connection. And they're trying to get over to Orchard Road, or they're trying to get over to Spring Creek Park, and they don't know that that's the path. And we're not a very far distance from the parking lot to what we're talking about with a College Avenue alternative path to campus, right?
You're right.
So what I'm wondering is it currently a trail, or is it an internal sidewalk?
It's a trail.
Yeah, physically, it's a trail, but how are we seeing it in terms of the pedestrian master plan? Yeah, I'm kind of curious.
Hi, I'm Kathy Madison. I live on Puddintown Road. I live directly across from the entrance, the staff entrance to Millbrook Marsh. All the neighbors and people that live there and use the path know that there's a path through the marsh. I walk it myself every day. I walk down to Spring Creek Park, or I can't remember wherever I feel like walking. We all use that. There's people that live, on the circle around Cedar Lane. Everyone goes and knows to walk there, because you can't walk around the curve
Right.
by the dairy, because you kick your legs in your hands. And so yes, I think that people do realize that. I see people coming down on bicycles on Puddintown Road, and they pull into this little parking area and ride down and go.
Do they come over the bridge and go behind the barn and continue out?
Yes.
I guess what I'm thinking is, from a consistency standpoint, right? It would be nice to have a consistent connection between the shared use path out to Puddintown Road, closer to College Avenue.
Right.
Right now, it seems like there's a disconnect in my mind. Once you cross that bridge, you're on a different type of surface. And I see the direction both ways, right? People wanting to get out to Orchard Road, but also wanting to get from there to this new facility, right? So I'm kind of seeing it in both directions. And, at the moment, it just doesn't seem like there's no continuity, I guess. That's my concern. Yeah, go ahead,
I
Pam.
think that people that live there understand.
The people that live there do, but I don't think somebody who's exploring would necessarily know that. People on bikes or other things, trying to figure out a way to get there.
There really isn't an alternative of that, unless you do stay on the road.
Yeah.
But it just, maybe because I've been there for 45 years, to me, it's just a natural way.
Yeah, you have local knowledge of it. Yeah, I'm just trying to see it from the perspective of somebody who just moved here and is looking around. They're gonna say, oh, you can't go any further.
Okay.
That's where I was kind of coming.
Okay, well, the path kind of takes you you know, I mean, to me, paths take you there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You come out of the parking lot, there's a path. You come down the, you know, driveway, there's a path. And you follow the path, there's a sign that says trail. And it's not hard to figure out, I guess is my point.
okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Pam, did you have a comment that helped answer Paul's question?
Yeah, just 2 points. When you do cross over that bridge, that wooden bridge, you do come back to some TSA that's there. It's a little grown in. That's shown on this plan to be improved, and then you are able to connect to the macadam of the shared use path. I actually ride from Lamont and come around, and I'll come down and ride into Millbrook. We also actually have people riding on the boardwalk, although you are supposed to dismount. So people are coming in across the boardwalk and then getting back on their bikes and riding through the TSA trail. So there is a connection there, and part of the requirement that's been asked of us, which we have no issue with, is we're improving the signage there. So there will be signage, new signage at the end of that shared use path that will indicate this is the approved pathway through. So they can either come through or go back out by a boardwalk.
And is that gonna be right down there in the lower
Yeah,
left?
there'll be signage on the top end, which is not on your screen currently. I don't know, Lindsay, if you're able to pull that down. Yeah,
I see
so
it.
where that darker is the bridge.
Yeah, I'm
and the
familiar
shared
with
use
the
path.
bridge.
Yep, so
Yeah.
there'll be signage there indicating people can come through. That is the approved
Will there
pathway.
be signage at the bottom saying that you can get to the bike path from
Yes,
there?
we're gonna sign the whole thing, and we're also gonna remind people that, you know, Millbrook Marsh Nature Center is closed from, you know, evening, dusk to dawn, but there is approval for people to ride through who are commuting. So as long as people are staying on Farm 12 and using that approved path, which will have some small bollard-style, low-level lighting in the future, then that is the path we'd ask them to stay on. So it
Yeah.
is designated.
Yeah, the
That
nature of
helps-
my
that
question,
helps.
is
Yeah.
this an internal sidewalk or is it a trail?
I actually.
And
when I
anything
filled
we
the
could do to
handbook, I
make it
said
more
it's
of an
both.
internal sidewalk, I'm
Yeah.
for, because we want to improve access and visibility and, you know, pedestrian use, right?
Yeah.
So I
I'm
just-
in the position of, I think it's both. It's probably not defined that way, but it is used as the main thoroughfare, particularly from the parking lot across the property and in from Puddingtown Road above the bridge.
And I guess that begs the question, if it's an internal sidewalk, is there any township responsibility for maintaining it as well?
They asked for an alternative, and we gave them that alternative in the planning commission, instead of having a hard surface all the way around Puddingtown.
Yeah.
So I would say, planning commission, we're looking at as a sidewalk, not internal.
Yeah, the answer to the question, Paul, specifically is no. The township, even though the sidewalks are in the right of way, township does not bear the responsibility for the maintenance of those sidewalks.
Right.
It rests with the property owner, so.
Yeah, not a
an
sidewalk, I
internal-
was thinking shared use path, because we do that, and we built that into our budget in order to keep some of the shared use paths clear in the winter. We just had that discussion a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to hear what other people's thoughts are, but I just, from a continuity standpoint, as long as there's no environmental concerns, if the only real concern is cost, you know, I think from a durability perspective and, so, you know, from a consistencies perspective, the hard surface doesn't seem like a downside to me. At least, maybe at the entrance and terminus, at both ends, maybe in between, something else, but that kind of gives the visual that, hey, this continues on somewhere. So anyway, I've taken up enough time, I'd like to hear what everyone
No,
else
it's
has.
fine. Carla? Lindsay, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I found the plan from July 9th, 2013, and the note, a waiver is requested of section 180.16.1 of the College Township Code pertaining to the installation of sidewalks along all streets. Note, a sidewalk will be required when an adjoining property installs a sidewalk along its frontage and may be required with future phases of development at the Millbrook Marsh Nature Center.
Right. But again, regardless if that note's in there, we're in new turf because we're talking about new development on this.
Was
site,
the
right?
shared use path there at the time?
That says an
Yeah.
access walkway shall be part of this
The
parking.
trail, yeah.
Trail.
Okay.
So, I have to be the Debbie Downer and just say I'm really disappointed. Every time Phase 2 of Millbrook Marsh has come, in any meeting I've been in, I've tried to make a statement to say, please make sure that sidewalks are a part of the plan that comes to us. When they came to us for money, I think, for fundraising, I made that comment. I know I did. And here, the plan comes before us, and it does not have sidewalks. This is a thoroughfare. I'm sorry, the 6 foot wide, sometimes less than that, paths through the marsh are are what is probably used most often, but I know it's not preferred. It's not direct, it's roundabout. Kids even use between the barn and the education building, that hill, there's like a cow path through like down that steep hill, because it's more convenient to just get up and get out back onto Puddintown Road. And cow paths mean something. That's the way people go. I love that you put that internal trail to get the people who live there and walk there to use the marsh, and it's not just motor driven. When the parking lot was brought, I had to push just to get a mowed path from Puddintown to that bottom corner, just so that the local residents could at least walk in and get off the road and not have to drive to the marsh right next door to them. So the trail you've added, I think should have been there anyway. Although, to be honest, it's right along the parking lot, which seems kind of redundant in my mind. If you wanted to put some aggregate to link the parking lot in Puddintown, you could have done a lot shorter trail than that. I understand the curve. There's all kinds of problems there. I get that. But to have 0 sidewalk and that as the alternative, I can't vote for it. So I know that's like a really strong statement here. I love the marsh. I'm just really disappointed tonight.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Rich?
Wow, how do I follow that?
Sorry.
No, this is an interesting plan for College Township. We keep talking about maintenance and this and that and the other thing. Yeah, that's us too. So we are involved through COG, so we contribute towards that. So we do have a vested interest in it and everything. And beyond that, we've made a commitment to pedestrian friendlies. In no general order, I doodle a lot. One of the goals for this site is to become more of an event center, have the potential of an event center as well. So that needs to be, so you're gonna have new visitors to the property and everything. So we need to make sure they're covered. On the tech bulletin, it says TSA is a wearing surface for trails. So if we're looking at utilizing the internal conduit as a pseudo sidewalk or a replacement sidewalk, then I have a little bit of concerns for that. I did see in the technical bulletin a note about a DSA, which is a drive surface. I don't know if that's an option, but something to think about. Again, routine maintenance, we're responsible, we're in that loop and everything, and put our COG hat on. Anything we can do to reduce that would be great. I had a note about, cars drive on gravel, people walk on hard surfaces better. From a safety standpoint, it's just a reality in my world. The E&S stuff, more design, everything, yeah, that doesn't hold. It's unfortunate, but it is gonna be what it's gonna be. The interpretation, I don't concur with the engineer's interpretation of the entrance lighting requirement. I do believe it is required. the question I would have to staff, is there a minimum requirement for, like foot candles of that light? Or it's illuminated, it could be a light bulb, kind of thing. So I do understand the concern that you don't want, well, we can't have light trespass, but even beyond that, this is a nature center, you don't want to go too far with it. So if there's a minimum, that's where, we should.
Basically, a street light is what it's looking for.
Well, if that's what the ordinance says, sure. If it gives some leeway, let's lean towards as little light as possible, but still, I do think that that's a value to have lighting at entrances and exits. Interesting, to Carla's point, she calls them cow paths, we call them goat paths. That's actually one of the methods that we use. We don't put if we don't have to, we don't put sidewalks in until people start using it. And then we put sidewalks where the goat paths are, because that's where they're gonna be needed and everything. So if there's cow, goat paths now, that is a very strong indicator of where it might be, and everything. But, so my big concerns, and going back to the maintenance item, yeah, if you're gonna use that in lieu of the sidewalk that is required by the ordinance, then I think it has to be in a similar capability as the sidewalks that we require for all of our other land development plans and everything. If you're putting a sidewalk along Puddintown, then that's what it would be. You want to put it inside, it's shorter. And honestly, I think it does, I think it makes some sense, because I could see people cutting that, if they know it's a path, cutting that corner using that path and everything. So, that's why.
Okay. I was hoping there would be more of a clear consensus after we went around the table. So let's see if we can get there. Jeff? The TSA surface is considered pervious?
It is.
So that's the reason part of the reason we're pushing for this. Is that a threshold for resubmission? Is it because then if you went to asphalt, you would have more impervious surface?
That is one reason, and then like I mentioned earlier, it changes the design criteria now, so now we'd be forced to look at, proper widths and for dual use trail and all that sort of thing. So like Rich was saying, it is what it is, it can be done, that's not a reason, but it does play into it from an engineering standpoint.
Okay, did I hear you say, Don?
Yeah, I'd like to just correct, it's not pervious, it's not quite as impervious as paving. In technical terms, paving has a CN value of 98, whereas a gravel is an 85, and like lawn is a 58. So you have lawn down here, gravel here, and asphalt up here. They're close, and I think actually a TSA is probably higher than an 85 because it is so dense. Yeah, but
So it's something
it's a
between gravel and
smidge, it's a smidge less than asphalt.
So we're talking
That's good info.
small degrees of increased perviousness here versus
Yeah.
asphalt. Okay. Did I also hear you say that if you went back through that exercise, it would have to then be 8 feet? Where did the 8-foot reference come in?
Because that's what I'm saying, making a comment about it, you have to go back to design standards. So if you're looking at a dual use, whether you want to call it sidewalk, once you get into dual use, based on design criteria, the minimum width would be an 8-foot wide facility. You can go wider than that, but by design standard, it would be an 8-foot wide facility. Now,
Okay.
there's, we're able to get some sort of waiver on something like that, that's for later discussion, but it opens up that can of worms that rather than utilizing the existing network as it is, you would now be required to upgrade that network to meet design standard.
Okay, so that's where the 8-foot reference came in,
Correct.
because that's the minimum,
Yes.
Rich.
So if you had a walking portion and a biking portion, is there a requirement for a separation between those two? In other words, the asphalt, the walking could be the asphalt and the gravel could be right next to it.
No, I think that's when it's just based on how it's classified. So if it's dual, I guess you could have a separation, have a walking pedestrian sidewalk and a completely separate bike trail.
Yeah.
You could do that, but if you're classifying it as a dual use.
Right, and it's gonna be a minimum of 8 feet, I get,
Yes.
yeah,
That-
right.
that-
So you could have a sidewalk of a minimum and the other use
Yes.
as a minimum.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Paul?
What is the current width?
6 feet.
Currently, it's 6 foot. And okay.
Okay. Carla?
Sorry, I got
Is it
a
on
little
this?
emotional there, so I pulled it together. I just wanted to offer like my full thought, which is that the two connecting streets, Cedar and Bathgate, if a sidewalk went from the bottom of this map here up to Cedar and then pulled into the marsh, I think that would be the ideal path plan and replacement of an alternative sidewalk to the whole frontage on Puddingtown Road. Does that make sense?
Yes, and let me ask a related question for clarification. For example, if we were to require, let me back up a minute. If we were to support the alternative sidewalk, we would be getting a 6-foot wide path through the site. If instead you were to build a sidewalk along Puddingtown, it would only need to be 5 feet. That's correct, right? So
Yes.
we're not only
Yeah, we're only
trading.
requiring a sidewalk along the road, not a
No,
dual use
To
path.
meet the requirement, it would be a 5-foot sidewalk.
Correct.
That's what we're asking to be waived. And in lieu of that, we're getting a 6-foot pathway through the site. I'm just trying to clarify the issues here. Hang on, Anthony. What we're saying then is, if this council is requiring it to be a hard surface, like asphalt, absent a waiver, it would need to be 8 feet.
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure we understand where, what we're looking at here. So we would then be trading a 5-foot sidewalk along Puddingtown for an 8-foot sidewalk through the site. Okay?
So I would also like to point out that, I really think if you haven't walked that through path in a while, I think you should. It's not direct. You're walking around, you're walking past, like between a pavilion and a outhouse kind of shed thing and down and around and through. It's not super tight, don't get me wrong, but when they have an event, then where do you walk? I guess you
Okay,
have
but-
to go through the event.
Let me add to that, an 8-foot, far less direct path through the
Okay.
site. And again, I'm not suggesting anything, I'm trying to clarify. I'm trying to
Clarify. No,
create
that's important.
a
It's
basis
important.
for the next
Yeah.
level of discussion here. Mike?
Yeah, this isn't a comment, I just wanted to acknowledge for you that we do have a hand raised, and they've been frantically waving at the screen, so, at your discretion, but I want to acknowledge that they do have their hand raised.
Okay. All right, so, just for the record, I walk it, but I'm okay with the less direct internal path, so I kind of need to figure out here,
Sure.
if that is the majority here, where we are with the surface. So let's go back around in the same order. Anthony, having heard everything, we need to reach some kind of conclusion, both on the location and the surface.
I'm okay with the alternative, as Planning Commission suggested, being a hard surface, which would make it then an 8-foot path.
Paul?
Yeah, one quick more question, if I might. That curve, if you went along Puddingtown Road, even if you put a sidewalk there, I'm not sure it would be all that much more safe than an internal one. I kind of prefer the internal one for some reasons. So therefore, I'm leaning toward what Anthony articulated there. Just because it is a path, I think we need to delineate it as a path. I worry that even if we put the sidewalk there, it just wouldn't be as safe as it would be internally, even if it's more indirect.
Carla?
Well, I kind of think I personally want to hear what they have to say. I would approve a sidewalk that goes up to Cedar Lane and then somehow turns in to avoid that curve. When I say
Okay, Mike,
up,
could you show us Cedar Lane on there?
It is right there.
Okay.
yeah, so there's
Carly,
already
you're
a
saying something
driveway.
like this.
Yeah, I would like to see a sidewalk that runs where that hand is going and then turn in to avoid the curve as the alternate, but.
May I ask, is that for safety reasons too, sort of what I articulated, or?
To avoid the curve?
Yeah.
Safety and money. I
Okay.
mean, that curve has a bridge too, I think, like
We
there's
would need a bridge.
yeah.
I would,
it's
because
a-
the spring is right,
Yeah.
yeah, there's the
Yeah,
drain
it's
from the
kind of
spring.
a crazy tight spot in all regards there.
Okay.
Okay, Rich?
I just want to confirm what Carla's saying. Are you saying for the length of the Millbrook property, basically from just around Bathgate up to Cedar and then it turns internal?
Yeah, so like. this
Coming
edge-
from College Avenue.
Right.
Yeah, the edge of the property
Yep.
up to Cedar and then somehow turn it
Right.
internal however they want.
So.
Yeah, you could turn in right before that parking lot on the right side.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I'm just confirming, not the one that goes internal immediately at the edge of the property, go the length of the property
Correct,
to Cedar, and then go internal.
correct, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to confirm that. And then the second thing, you know, I keep hearing the 5-foot sidewalk and whatnot. If we're granting relief or whatever, can we grant relief in the width? Or is that a requirement?
Well, we would be careful not to call it a shared use path.
No, I agree with that.
If internal, we said this is an internal sidewalk, then you could use the 5 foot, but now we understand that you're gonna have bike traffic on it, but we would be very careful not to call it a shared use path.
Okay, but again, I go back to my point that you could have, and the pavement would be acceptable it doesn't have to be concrete, it could be pavement.
For sidewalk, yeah, we allow both.
Okay, so you could have a 5-foot paved sidewalk. What is the requirement for the bike?
A bike path?
Yeah,
Well, if for a shared use path, bike path, 8 foot's generally the minimum.
again, I'm trying to
Yep.
look at them separately. Can you look at them separately? Okay,
I mean, if you wanted to call it a sidewalk, you would have signs at either end, dismount and walk your bike. And we know that people do listen to signs very well.
they do, they really do. We need more of them.
They don't look
Yeah,
at them.
didn't you hear Thompson Wood? We need more signs. That will make them do the right thing. But, yeah, so I understand the point, and I'm leaning, it's an either or kind of thing, and I do understand Carla's point of the internal, and they can do the math, they can do the financial math of which one is better. I'm not as absolute in needing one along Puddintown to Cedar. I will say we were too nice back when the
I
when the
was
first.
not on the board.
Yeah. Well, College Township.
Yeah, okay.
You know, that would have been the time. And we had another opportunity in that, and we granted a waiver, so.
Yeah.
And interestingly, it was based on cost, and then, like I said, we're partially responsible for the cost, so,
Right.
and everything, but.
Oh, this is why we become such a hard group when it comes to waivers, sidewalk waivers. Well, I think we've taken an incremental step towards a consensus here. Jeff, a couple more questions, maybe help us move along here. If, for example, 2 questions. If we were to settle on asking for a sidewalk of some yet to be determined width and yet to be determined surface, either asphalt or concrete, along Puddintown Road. But the rest of it from Cedar on in remained as currently planned. Does that trip the threshold for another review?
Yeah, now, once we start having earth disturbance in some other area, then we're gonna have to run through the ENS process.
Even though it's in the right-of-way
Yeah, yeah.
along Puddintown Road?
Yep.
Okay, that was
It's
the,
part of the ENS requirement to go through and do all the new regulations for stormwater and earth disturbance.
that was not the answer I was hoping for.
Yeah, that's why I say, you know, really any deviation from what is proposed on the plan is going to require resubmissions other places to get those approvals.
All right, second question. If we were to go back to the hard surface path through the entire site, what, if anything, can the township do to assist, expedite, streamline the process that you talked about? Maybe staff could jump in here too, I don't know.
As far as a hard type surface, really if it's going to be in that dual use, and I know Dawn mentioned about trying not to classify it as that, to go with the width. If there's a waiver of some sort that needs to be granted, I think that would be in the control of the township rather than, even though the design standard has a minimum width, I would think, I don't know for sure without doing some research, but I would think that the township would be able to grant some sort of a waiver to waive that width requirement would be number one. That would keep us on, you know, the same footprint. If we can stay on the same general footprint, then we won't have to do resubmission, at least for ENS. It would just be whatever approvals are required from the township level. We had talked previously, and Pam and I were just discussing it now, if the township is adamant on a hard surface, if we were able to do an FDR type surface to where we're adding cement into the existing surface, blending that together to get a harder surface. It's not asphalt, but it would still be a concrete-like surface. If that would be permissible, that could possibly be an alternative to look into.
And wouldn't trip the threshold for a re-review because the width would stay the same?
Correct, because that, you know, we could go with the narrative or the justification that it's still a maintenance type application and it is not a new design. You know, we're not changing the feature of the functionality of that sidewalk or that walkway area. We are doing, you know, an upgrade from a maintenance standpoint. Going from a trail surface to, it's gonna look and feel like concrete, not gonna be quite as hard as concrete, but it's gonna have an additive in it to get you the smoothness and the strength that you're looking for.
And when you plow snow, there won't be any gravel to put back in
Correct.
place?
Correct.
Having heard that, let's go around the table quick. Anthony?
One of the things I failed to ask, I mean, because we keep going down the path of, like, let's not call it a shared use if we want to go down that path and so forth. As Planning Commission proposed, and what I'm seeing is you're asking for a waiver and this is an alternative. So the alternative should be the dual use. And not to steer away from it. And one of the things that I did fail to ask, so even though the park, and I think it was somewhere in here as well, the park's open from dusk to dawn, would it still have public use, or, you know, after dusk, as a sidewalk and so
As a
forth?
group area, it would, it just the parcel itself would be closed dusk to dawn.
And that's where I'm going in the sense that we shouldn't be calling it an internal path because you are proposing it as an alternative to what would be required from a pedestrian walkway perspective. So that's, you know, I support the Planning Commission's recommendation.
And you would find that, that surface as proposed here?
No, a hard surface, 8 feet wide, because we're not going to eliminate that
Okay,
dual use.
that's what I'm trying to find out as we go around the table. Paul?
Yeah, that's the way I'm leaning right now too. I mean, pending hearing anything else, it would be disqualified.
So
That's the way
you
I'm-
still prefer the traditional asphalt surface?
Yeah, something to match the shared use path, to make that connection.
Okay. As long as we're going around the table on this, I'm going to ask everybody the same thing. Would you be open to a waiver that would require that hard surface to only be as wide as it is right now, which is 6 feet? Having heard what would be required here.
I would not be.
Okay. You'd rather have the 8 feet?
Correct.
I'm leaning toward the 8 feet unless there was a good reason that I heard not to.
Okay. I'm trying to get,
Yeah.
Carla?
I'm struggling to move at all without hearing, like, these people, I know one of them has the same last name as I do, but he often disagrees with me. So, like, these people live right there and might have different opinions from the one I have. And so if they are, like, if they're in favor of not, then I would be swayed that way, but I just can't move. And it's hard for me.
Understood, we'll get to them.
I know. So I still feel like behind the barn is a really if the alternative path were just a little bit more straightforward and a little bit more believable, then I could believe it. But this one just isn't believable to me. I don't know why.
All right, Rich.
I would be interested in staff's thoughts on, what was the product they referenced?
Full depth
FDR?
reclamation, is that what you mentioned? What's funny is because when we took the turn back for Puddintown Road, there were some areas where the existing pavement section was not very thick, and they actually did that full depth reclamation on that road. And basically, if you're grinding up the soil and you're putting in cement, and you make a hard surface, it's not as pretty as a concrete surface, but it's a hard surface. But we actually used it right there on
Is that what the edge of the road was made of? Or?
Well, I think we did it full width, or maybe it was just widening. I'd have to think about it. But there was areas where it was thin pavement, and all we were doing basically was overlaying that road as part of the turn back. But on those thin areas, we needed to beef it up a bit, so we used that process that Jeff talked about.
So you wouldn't have any, I mean, it's pavement, it ends up
Yeah,
as a pavement
it's a little
substitute.
rough.
Yeah.
It's a little rougher, but
Well,
I mean,
it's not bad from a traction standpoint
It's not
either.
soft, or I won't say soft, but it's not like gravel. I don't.
Natural non-slip.
Yeah, yeah.
Natural non-slip.
Yeah.
Paul needs a clarification on that.
I just wanted to ask from a maintenance standpoint as well, like plowing and those kind of things, it wouldn't degrade.
Well, basically, whenever you do it on a road, they recommend you gotta put a top on it, bituminous top, but I mean, that's
Okay,
a
that's
whole
what-
different, I've never used it on a path, I don't know how, well it would hold up, but, if you're doing it on a road, you put a top on it. But it would be a hard surface.
That's what I wasn't sure about durability and maintenance.
Right, it would be better than TSA
I'm not so
gravel.
sure that it's
but-
gonna be any cheaper, though.
Sure, they can do their math. Yeah, I guess, I wouldn't have an objection to the FDR, but pavement, I assume from a dollar standpoint, they're gonna be leaning towards pavement if we push towards a hard surface. I'm clearly leaning towards a hard surface. The 6 foot or the 8 foot, I don't have a strong, I can make an argument either way.
Okay, so it seems like we have consensus, maybe not unanimous, that we would prefer a hard surface, either asphalt or something similar, and we're okay with the idea of it, the alternate using the site as opposed to Puddintown Road. This is an agenda item that we're looking to take action on. Ordinarily, we would wait until we have an action before council, meaning a motion and a second, before we open it up to the public. But given that we seem to be uncertain on a couple of the variables here. At this point, I would offer those who are in attendance remotely to address council on what they've heard before we consider any action. And let's start with that guy who has the same last name as one of our council members, since he's already been called out. Scott? Have you heard everything have you heard what we've been talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, okay, terrific. So, it's kind of awkward that I got picked first, because I too kind of wanted to hear from people who live on Cedar Lane in particular. So I do have some comments, but I will defer to them. On the subject of hard surface, it makes zero sense for a nature center to pave. TSA is hard. I walk it, I bike it, it's fine. It's perfectly great for walkers, it's ADA compliant, it's perfectly fine for cyclists. Parks and Rec is already maintaining the existing TSA, so they're just gonna have a little more to maintain. They already do that, they know what they're doing. That's my comment on paving. Please don't pave anymore in the marsh, it doesn't make any sense. On the subject of lighting, which we haven't talked about too much, I wish to express strong opposition to the Planning Commission's request for lighting at the entrance. Again, it's a nature center. It is bad for critters to have extra light at night. Not to mention, it will be invasive to neighbors. It will add light pollution in general. And you're using electricity for all of those negative things. There's already no lighting along the entire length of the Puddintown Trail, and it's fine. There are sections of the College Township Bikeway where there's no lighting, and it's fine. So please reconsider that part of the plan. Finally, about the proposed route in general. Broadly speaking, and again, I defer entirely to the residents of Cedar Lane. So I may be speaking out of turn here, but I just want to echo what Carla said. We didn't plan this, I actually started the meeting probably thinking otherwise. But considering this plan, what the residents of Cedar Lane who are trying to get downtown or to campus via that new and exciting path that we're thinking about that way, and how much more easily they'll be able to get to that path if there is a sidewalk or multi-use path, whatever is decided, along it, just that stretch of Puddintown Road. Forget the curve. The curve, yeah, that we can just skip the curve and come through the marsh. That's great. Otherwise, we're asking those residents to enter the marsh. We're basically adding, I looked at a map, we're basically adding a little over 1/10 of a mile of walking for them if they're going to use the path. Now, most likely they would enter the marsh and then just kind of walk along the grassy sward there and then across the parking lot. And so the path that we've added for them would just be a sham anyway. So instead of that game, let's just do the most direct route. Let's stick to our guns. Puddintown Road is on the pedestrian facilities master plan. Stick to it. And again, I defer entirely to, I think we have actual residents of Cedar Lane on the line here, so I want to defer to them on that. But again, in review, it doesn't make any sense to pave any part of nature center. It doesn't make any sense to add lighting to a nature center. And I think the idea of a Puddintown path just up to Cedar Lane, and then it makes the most sense and avoids all the safety and cost concerns of the curb. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Scott. And before we move on to the next person, just a clarifying question. The lighting at the access points, are they bollards? Or are they?
Well, there's requirements in the ordinance, and it does consider zoning districts. And this class here is specific to the open space zoning district. So it considers what would be the environment that they're in. They have maximum lumens. The maximum pole height in this case is 20 feet, so nothing over 20 feet.
Okay, so we're talking about a pole that would be as high as 20 feet.
at the most.
With a max lumen, and obviously they'd be full cutoff,
Yep,
correct?
full cutoff, max lumen is 60,000. Then there's light trespass, pre and post curfew, which are 0.3 and 0.1. And then there's a uniformity ratio, which Don could probably explain that better. And then a minimum maintained average illumination of 0.5.
And did I hear you correctly that this body has the ability to downsize that and still meet, or that those are minimums?
They're all, the only
It's
minimum
max.
is the maintained average illumination and the uniformity ratio. Those are minimums. The other, light trespass, lumens per acre, and maximum pole height, those are all maximums.
Okay, but we also have the ability to waive it in entirety, and that's what the plan came in at originally. Because I'm assuming the plan was submitted without that light,
Yes, there was no lights at the original.
which would have required some kind of waiver?
Right, and planning commission said that, we had a question at planning commission concerning the lighting going over into the neighbors, and we said that they had to comply to code where there wouldn't be any lighting that wouldn't trespass over on anybody else's land.
Okay,
And we also looked at it as the nature center where we would put in the least illumination as we could by code.
okay. We've got two more remote participants. We're going to go to Mr. Wendell first, and then Lindsay, you'll have to help me with the name because I can't read the name of the other caller. So
Laura Fulton.
Laura
Fulton.
Fulton? Okay, Laura, you're on deck. Mr. Wendell, you're up now. Can you hear us? All right, I'll tell you what, we'll go to Laura, and then if Mr. Wendell's still around, we'll come back to him. Ms. Fulton?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yeah. Thanks. So, yeah, I live on Cedar Lane, and we cut through the marsh, as we refer to it, quite a lot to get to the bike path. Honestly, I wish that the curve were not what you say dangerous, because I would prefer a sidewalk that connected all the way from Town to the existing sidewalk, because like I said, we cut through the marsh, and when you're walking, it's fine, it's not a big deal, but when you are on bikes, it is disruptive, and it's not what I would prefer for my family of young children on bikes. But you know, if people are saying they don't think that that's safe, then that it is what it is, I guess. But I do agree that having a sidewalk the length of Town from Cedar to Bathgate and beyond would be really beneficial to the residents who live there. We have a pretty much older population in the neighborhood, aside from a few of families with young children, and there are a lot of people who are retirees who do a lot of walking during the day. They walk the loop of Cedar Lane to Bathgate, over to the marsh, and around, but there is no sidewalk, so they're forced to either walk through people's yards along the road, which is dangerous, or they have to cut across into the marsh and walk that strip, which is also not ideal. Now, right now, it's not too bad because the weeds are all died down, and so it's not too hard to step over the little piece of wire fencing and get into that strip. But in the summer, there is no way when the grasses are high, and so the only way to get from Bathgate over to the marsh is to walk up the hill towards Lenore and then cut over across the street on a blind curve. It's not safe, and so you know, having a sidewalk where there is no, like I said, wire fencing, there's like that's kind of been pushed down, and high grasses where people could safely cross either there or at Cedar Lane would be much safer. And then again, you know, so I think what Carla was saying, that this is, you know, this has been promised, this has been said, oh, if we do any more, the sidewalk will go in, and it just seems like every time this isn't happening. And I agree that having this sidewalk from that area around Bathgate to the back of the marsh it feels silly. I don't really understand what the benefit of that is, other than to just say, well, we put in a sidewalk like we were supposed to, but I don't really see the purpose of that because there's already a parking lot there, with sort of a gravel path where people can walk. So, yeah, so my preference as a resident of that neighborhood would be to have a sidewalk where there should be one. So, and again, yeah, when you cut through the marsh, when you're on bikes, it's not the most convenient. During the day especially, there's a lot of people walking, there's young children, and it does feel, not ideal. I think to be able to connect fully to the bike path on a sidewalk would be my preference.
Okay. Just so I understand, I think I heard you describe a circuit where a sidewalk between Cedar and Bathgate would actually serve a purpose for somebody who is not necessarily going towards Spring Creek Park from there or going towards downtown. Did I hear?
Yeah, because like I said, there's a lot of people who walk sort of a loop.
Okay.
On Bathgate to Cedar Lane or vice versa, and they walk through the marsh, and they walk that, 3-4 times in a row to kind of get their exercise if they're not going to go farther towards the park, wherever. But, and I see them, they're walking along Pudding Town, sometimes on the road, or you have to go through people's yards, in those houses that are across from the marsh.
Okay.
Because there isn't really a safe way to cross, especially where, like I said, Bathgate, it's not so bad where Cedar Lane is into the marsh, but especially to cross from Bathgate to get over to the marsh, it is not safe. Like I said, you have to either step over through high grasses and brush, and there's like some wire fencing, or you have to walk a little bit on up the hill towards Lenore until you get past that high grass.
The
Okay.
sidewalk would still be on the opposite
Hang on, Ed.
side.
Hang on.
It still would be, but at least the grass there would be cleared. Right now, it's not cleared.
Okay.
So you're stepping through brush.
I got you.
Stepping through an area that people are not supposed to walk.
Yeah, we got you.
But if there's a sidewalk there, it would be cleared.
I think I got the information I was looking for, because I think there are at least folks who are wondering of what value would that section along Puddin Town serve, and I think you at least identified one segment of the neighborhood who would find value in a partial sidewalk along Puddin Town. I think is what I heard you say. Okay. Mr. Wendell, are you still on board here?
Yeah, no, I'm here. Sorry I missed when you called me, but I wanted to hear Laura first anyway, since she is in that. There's a bunch of houses in the Bathgate Loop that would be significantly affected there. So my comments, I live on 314 Puddin Town, so I'm just south of where this map runs out. And I'm very familiar with trying to get from my house, or you could say anywhere College Avenue-ish, to the bike path. And I think that the biggest thing that I would say is that, and I've looked at some of the drawings as far as potential connectors into campus, or some potential, there's a section of road that I own there that I intend to someday build a sidewalk to Puddin Town Road. I know that's going to be part of my planning, so that I can kind of be part of this process. I think that the planning, or the township, should be really focused on making sure to maintain continuity to the bike path, that there is the bike path and it runs the whole way to College Avenue and eventually the whole way into campus, if that was part of the designs. And so to have something that broke that up, I think would be a big miss, especially on such a huge section here. So I did have a question, a couple other points. I would second Scott's points about the light. I don't see a need for the light, and I just think it adds light pollution, and it doesn't bother me. Laura and the people on Bathgate may have a concern about crossing there at night or something that may change that, but from my standpoint, that's not the case. I did have a question regarding this material. Is the material, the trail surface aggregate, is that the material that is currently used in the marsh for the sections of path that are there?
Ethan, do you have any other questions or any other comments? We'll get to the question. I just want to make sure that if you have other questions,
Well,
we get them all out there
I
now.
mean, depending on the answer to that, I mean, my comment would be that what is currently there in path form is highly prone to water washout. It gets ruts in it. My kids fall on their bikes every time they try to ride there. You know, they ride their bikes off of pavement and hit this gravel stuff and just collapse. I've had to carry them home several times because of that. So it does not produce a continuity between the bike path and anything else. So my strong vote would be the route that Carla suggested. I think accommodates the many houses in the Bathgate Cedar Loop. And then I'm personally fine diving into the marsh and saving some cost in utilizing the existing path that is there. But a hard surface would be my vote, simply because I would want to be pushing for continuity with the bike path.
Okay, then let's get a quick affirmation of what I suspect, and that is that under the proposed, at least at a minimum, under the proposed surface, it would be much harder than what's in there right now. Correct.
Is some of that the older AASHTO number 10?
It probably is, I don't know.
What he was describing sounds like AASHTO number 10.
For the age, but I don't know that for certain.
So is it fair to say in response to the question that if we were to go with, even if we didn't go with asphalt, what is proposed would be significantly harder than what's in there right now?
Correct.
And it wouldn't mush up or what, you wouldn't have the issue that he's describing?
I would say no, not, you know, it's gonna be a maintenance deal long-term, but initially, no, it would be much better than what's out there.
Okay. Ethan, did you get that? Did you hear the answer there?
I did, and that makes sense. You know, not knowing exactly how the maintenance of that is gonna shake out and stuff, I would still have concerns. And I think just personally I would think we would want to keep a continuity to the bike path. But you know, I don't understand this material, and you know, if it's as good, you know, I certainly have no reason to want to cause the marsh to spend more money if it's unnecessary.
Okay. All right, you guys know me, my goal is always to get unanimous consensus on something. Didn't think it would be this hard tonight, but let's give it another go. Having heard what you've just heard, Anthony or Paul, any revisions to?
Having heard what I just heard, and that's from users of folks that live in the vicinity, I would say with what Planning Commission presented, or, you know, proposed, the hard surface, 8 foot wide, because they're using that as an alternative, I could go with that, but I can understand the township's commitment that we have for pedestrian walkways and so forth, and the continuity and connectivity there. So though we waived it the first time around, we have the opportunity not to this time around, and it falls in line with our pedestrian master plan. So I would say I could go either way, and if want to leave the costs up to the developer to decide which one would be cost effective for them, but understanding that if it's the internal path, it still has to be the dual purpose, 8 foot wide of asphalt. If not, it would have to be on Town Road.
Okay, to be clear, you're okay with either routing now? You're okay with a routing that would come out and traverse part of
What Carla presented, going up to Bathgate and then entering into the marsh to the first building.
Okay, but did I hear you say your preference is that the entire thing be 8 feet?
Yes, that's what our plan is, so yes, that's the whole dual purpose of it, yes.
Understood, just wanted to clarify. Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I think after hearing the folks who live there and use it and just pulling up the map and looking a little bit more closely to remind myself, I mean, that does make sense to go between Lenore and Bathgate and Cedar and then turn in. If I'm not mistaken, you mentioned if we did try to follow the curve, setting aside any sort of safety concerns, that is where Bathgate Spring, you know, drains, so you'd need to put a bridge there, you right? I mean, you'd have to extend something to follow that path. So, you know, cutting through the marsh, that little elbow there, you know, I could live with that, but I would want it to be a continuity, I think that was the word that was used. That was what I was trying to get at earlier. I'd like the continuity. So along the frontage to Cedar and then continuity to the existing shared use path would be good to me.
And do both of you guys define continuity as asphalt, or does the proposed surface provide enough continuity surface-wise?
It doesn't for me. I mean, I think that part of the continuity for me is the surface. I understand Mr. Stilson's concern about, paving inside of, but this is instead of having to go around the curve or do something else. I think we're minimizing paving inside the preserve.
Inside, yeah. Carla?
I'll go last or next, or, I can't, pass, thank you.
That's why they put,
Question
What,
for,
are you deferring? I didn't. I'm sorry.
yeah, she passed. She deferred.
You've got people coming on
She
board
went-
with your suggestions.
She went to the,
I do, so
she
that's why I have
deferred
to
to the
pass.
second half.
Second half?
We're in the ninth overtime. Question for staff. So the requirement is a sidewalk along Puddintown, a sidewalk of 5-foot width,
Right.
not an 8-foot dual-use path.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay. So if a sidewalk went in, which could be asphalt or concrete, is what I have heard, if it went along Puddintown, the requirement would be 5 foot. And then if it, as Carla has suggested, if it bent into the park at that point, is there any width requirement on it at that point?
Well, as I said, if we were calling it a sidewalk, it'd be 5 feet. If we throw the term dual use path, then 8 foot is.
So I'm just gonna throw something out. And well, one other thing, master plan, since, is that on the agenda? Oh, yeah, that's on the agenda. So are we showing anything on, what exactly are we showing on Puddintown
Boy,
Road?
you like me to tip my hand, don't you?
Just this time, my friend.
So we show conceptual corridors, and Puddintown is shown as a conceptual corridor, and one of the core elements of what we view as the core element of the network moving forward, because it provides that level of connectivity from College Avenue and gets you around a barrier
Right.
to the existing,
Right.
on the existing section of College that we know.
You tipped enough, stop talking.
So that's where we're at.
Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna say I would support a 5-foot sidewalk along Puddintown to Cedar Lane across just the length of the Millbrook property, and then go internal to Millbrook and use the TSA at the 6 foot for the remaining port to connect back onto Puddintown Road.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Would you consider it just being 6 foot TSA the whole length? For continuity and.
On Puddintown?
Yeah,
I would not,
why?
because it's a sidewalk there, for sure.
But it's serving, we've been talking a lot about.
No, I understand.
Fitting the bike path network, and we've
Yep.
heard from these folks that they prefer 8 feet. I'm trying to find some,
No,
trying to find some middle ground.
no, a hard surface, 5 foot along Puddintown to Cedar Lane, TSA for the remaining section, to be reviewed again, I'm sure.
But it's 6 foot.
But it's 6 foot, yes. The existing 6 foot, the existing bed, upgrading to the TSA where required.
Okay. I think I know the answer to this question, but Jeff, if you put a 5 foot wide concrete sidewalk along Puddintown, we're still tripping that threshold, right?
Yeah, we're back into new approvals and
And we'd be tripping it whether it was a 5-foot concrete sidewalk, a 6-foot TSA
Right.
sidewalk, or an
8-foot dual use, yeah.
Okay. I think we moved farther apart on that round than we did before. Oh, boy. All right, Kathy, help us out here. Help me out.
I'm not gonna help you out. I know I've said this before, and I'm one of the people who actually walks around Cedar Lane and Bathgate and down Puddingtown. And my concern remains, and it has been from the very beginning, if you have people crossing Puddingtown Road from Bathgate to the marsh, you have a safety concern, because people come over that rise and come down at an amazing rate of speed. And that's my concern. That's why I like the pathway that Carla referred to earlier, along the parking lot to come out onto Puddingtown Road, because my vision was there's going to be some kid riding a bicycle down that path and shoot down onto Puddingtown Road. There's going to be a car coming down, and there's going to be, injuries or death. And I couldn't support that, and I still can't support that. I understand what you're saying about a sidewalk along Puddingtown Road. I get it, because I walk it, and I walk in front of the yards of all my neighbors when I walk it. But I think it's very dangerous. So if you're going to consider that, you need to consider some sort of a traffic calming, something that's going to slow people down. Because I've lived there for a long time and I've seen it. I've seen people come close to getting hit by cars that come down over that rise that comes down. It's like in front of one of those houses, the rise comes up and comes down. So I just want to point that out again. I've said it before and I will continue to say it. So just keep that in mind, because I think it's equally as dangerous as on the other end. Thank you.
All right, let me ask the question that I didn't think we'd have to ask tonight, but where are we with the time limit on this land development plan? Do we have, in the required action timeline, do we have another council meeting within that timeline without requiring an extension? Or asking for an extension?
Well, let's see.
While you're looking that up, the reason I'm bringing that up is that this is the first time we saw this, and I sure as heck didn't anticipate that we would have this level of disagreement between council members, planning commission, and that. I would not be uncomfortable doing what I generally don't like to do, and that is to consider a motion to table this so that we can look a little further into the lighting issue, which seems to have come out of nowhere. Maybe get a little bit more information on the options for the surface, think a little bit more, maybe get out there, take a look, maybe listen a little more to the residents, and bring this back. If we did that, would we need an extension?
It expires, the action deadline is January 16th, so
You do have a meeting. We will have a regular meeting after the reorganization meeting on January 3rd. So council will meet again in regular session before the deadline of action. So you could table and reconsider on the 3rd.
Okay, Jeff, Kathy, Pam, we could probably get a vote tonight on something. I'm not comfortable, it doesn't meet my goals as a chair. These folks may disagree with me, but I'm putting that out there not to delay the project, but to try to get as many people, happy with what is appeared to be a very sensitive aspect of this plan. So thoughts around the table on, taking a vote tonight, considering tabling. You guys, Paul?
Go ahead, Andrew.
I have no issue if you want to further review it and so forth. I didn't think we were that far apart, but I have no issue if you want to.
Okay, well, let me see if we aren't. What I am hearing is that we're okay, we've kind of coalesced around, we'll call it the Carla option, or should we call
No,
it the
don't call it
Stilson
that.
option?
No. The Cedar Lane.
Stick with the Cedar Lane option.
Thank you.
As far as the routing goes, there seems to be a consensus there. We don't seem to have a consensus on the material and the width. I'm hearing folks who would like to see the 8-foot for reasons articulated, and some who are satisfied with the 5 and don't want to consider the 8.
The 8 foot, just for my clarification, the 8 foot is for the dual use, and that's if we're using what they're putting in as the alternative. If we're putting the sidewalk, then whatever the requirements for the sidewalk are what the sidewalk requirements are. That's how I'm looking at it. The 8 foot, is a hard stand for a dual use, for continuity on a dual use bike path, if they want to use that portion as the alternative to sidewalks along Puddintown Road. Whatever's in the ordinance for sidewalks along Puddintown Road, and I think it was noted earlier that it's 5 feet, and it's 5 feet, and it's a concrete surface. And I can go either or, in the sense that if we want to leave it to the developer to decide if they want to continue down the path of an alternative use, then it has to be dual use, asphalt surface, 8 foot, or the cost associated with putting in a sidewalk along Puddintown Road, which to me, again, after hearing folks that live in the area and such, makes sense, and it makes sense from our long-term perspective on the pedestrian master plan.
Paul, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I was leaning toward the 8 foot sort of shared use surface because I was thinking continuity to the existing bike path and connecting to that corridor as, to Mike's. So that was where I was coming from. I mean, I could live with the sidewalk. I think it's harder for pedestrians and bikes to get along on a sidewalk that's only 5 feet wide, but I mean, if that's what the ordinance is, that's what the ordinance is. I could certainly live with that. I would be really curious to see this surface. If there were some good recent, TSA surface that we could go out and look at. Because I gotta be honest, I'm just not familiar with it. And I would feel a little bit more comfortable making a decision,
Yes.
To Rich's suggestion that maybe that be the 6 foot connector.
What version is used at Oak Hall?
Well, one trail I can tell you for sure is TSA, was put in 2017. If you've ever been on the Spring Creek Canyon Trail between Shiloh and Rock Road, that's a TSA, and it's holding up really nice where it's flat. Now, there's a section of the trail that's about 10%.
Okay, where you go up the steep hill there and
Yeah.
then over to the parking area.
Yeah, there's the
parking area on
Rock Road trailhead.
Yeah, I've been on that.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's real nice. The steep slope, you have a little bit of issues there, but,
And that's not maintained, is it?
no.
I didn't think so.
I mean, the steep part is, they were out about a month ago and repaired it, but in 4 or 5 years, they've had to repair it twice, but
But
you
they
get down
don't
on
keep
the.
it clear,
No.
is what I mean.
Yeah,
Like
no,
in the
there's no
winter
plowing,
time.
yeah, there's no winter
We're
maintenance
talking
at all.
about maintaining in
Yeah.
the winter, so I'm just.
Yeah, and I think it'll
wondering
take a
if there's-
beating if you have a winter where you're talking 15, 20 plows. But last year, or well, 2 years ago, I don't think we even had to touch it once. But, I mean, there's
I
an
understand.
example of a TSA trail. I don't know of anything, I can't think of anything around here.
Now I'm familiar with the surface. Now my
Okay.
question shifts to durability, right? I mean, because that is not one that is maintained the way that we're talking about. Sorry, didn't mean to complicate things
No, that's
further.
okay. I'm on that trail frequently, and
Yeah.
that's gonna be a mess if you're plowing it on a regular basis. You're gonna have a lot of maintenances.
Just acknowledging there's a hand raised.
Okay. Anything else, Carla or Rich? Does anybody feel we are close to a consensus here?
I mean, I think we're at I would make, how about this? I move to table the plan until we can get a little bit more information and maybe some alternatives back from the developer to meet the sidewalk requirement a little bit more closely.
Second.
I have a second. Now we have a motion on the floor. Let's go with internally here first. I like that idea, because frankly, I'm still stuck on the 8 feet. I think if we're gonna go out to Puddintown Road and we funnel people onto a 5-foot concrete sidewalk, we're doing a disservice to what we've been talking about, and that was connecting College Avenue to the bike path. So I'd like to have some more time to think about that. We have a motion on the floor. Before we consider action, I have to open this up to public comment. Let's go with the remote participants first. Christian, did you just join us?
Oh, no, I think I've been here for maybe a little after
All
seven.
right. We have a motion to table this.
I had to clean up dishes and things for dinner. But I just want to echo some of the things that were said by Paul and Rich. And I don't want to see the township miss an opportunity to continue, or in terms of making a continuous multi-use or shared use path in that part of the neighborhood. I really would like to see the continuity, the 8-foot wide piece, go forward. As far as the trail surface aggregate, I'm familiar with it, again, where Spring Creek Canyon and the Benner Pike, or excuse me, the Benner section that was put in not too long ago. It's an okay section. My concern it's an okay surface. My concern would definitely be for terms of the maintenance and the all ages and all abilities sort of residents who would be able to use that that surface when you're talking about either young children or older residents. The hard surface would certainly provide a more continuous, I think more enjoyable experience as well. That's really bad. Thank you so much.
Okay, as always, Christian, your input's welcome. I have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion or question on the motion here from the table?
I have a question.
Okay, hang on. Here? Nobody? All right, in the audience, before we take action, Pam and then Ed.
Yeah, just to clarify, I know you guys are talking about January 3rd. We'd be glad to bring back some additional ideas, but I don't think we can do it by the 3rd, just based on staff schedule and our engineer and architect.
That was our reorg meeting,
Yeah,
but we have a regular meeting.
on the
16th,
On the 16th. And I
which
think
is
that
the date of the expiration. So pardon me?
We're the 20th.
We're the 20th.
The expiration's the 16th.
The expiration's the 16th to 20th. So Pam, the way around that is, if you would be willing to consider granting us an extension for the review, we could then accommodate that at the 20th as well. But we would need at least a 30-day minimum. Oftentimes, they're longer than that. But if you would consider granting us the extension, we can extend the amount of time that we have to provide an approval.
I'm sure we can work that out. I think we need a little bit more time to be able to bring some more alternates and address all the conversation tonight, so we'll work on that. Thank you.
Ed?
Yeah, one of the comments that was made about the alternative of putting a sidewalk from Bathgate up to Cedar was safety issues. If you drive Puddintown Road and it was made the comment, you can't cross the street at Bathgate, and that could be a real problem. The Planning Commission did look at that, and that whole area there is a safety concern. If you put a sidewalk in anywhere there, even when you come out right here, you can walk up the grass of the people on that side of the road, but once you get up to Lenore, there is nothing that you can walk on the other side of the street, because it's all riprap and everything else. So even putting a sidewalk out along their property, out on Puddintown, you do have a safety issue.
Okay, thanks, Ed. More food for thought before the 20th. If there's no further comment or question, I'm looking. Don?
Well, maybe I'd suggest that between now and the 20th, if we don't get a lot of snow on the ground and ruin everything, maybe just meet with Jeff out there. We'll take a look around, staff and the design engineer, and walk around and see what makes the most sense.
Homework. Rich?
Yeah, just if staff could look into more definitely define the entrance lighting requirement. I mean, bollards, I think that needs intent.
Oh,
But-
okay. It's
Yeah,
an
but
entrance.
something low profile, but just sort of delineates this is an entrance.
This is an entrance.
Versus just
Yes.
a dark turn somewhere
Correct.
along.
And
this.
all I can, I put my day hat on, we have them at each of our entrances. What a difference. And then, I'll point to the Hills Plaza, the entrance off a branch, before they lit that to where it is now. And we are inviting people to this, for more than just a nature center, and we need to
They
keep that.
they do have nighttime activities, yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know, there is more to it than just the nature center anymore. Now, if you wanna talk solar lights and all that good kind of stuff, yeah, that makes complete sense, but if staff could sharpen the goal on that one, that'd be great.
Or maybe a waiver / alternative similar for the lighting. If the standards are more than what we're talking about, even the minimum standards, then an alternative waiver combo.
So are you looking for something that's going to be less intrusive than maybe what our ordinance requires? So we'll look into that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, like I've seen bollards used, and they work very well.
Okay,
They don't, matter of fact, in some sense, for driving, they're actually more effective than light way up high,
yeah,
so.
okay, got it.
Well, if you look on Benner Pike, you know, we just had that plan a while ago, the garage. And if you look at the properties along Benner Pike there, a lot of them are simply lighted signs. There is no overhead light, and I think there is a couple that are just bollard style lighting. And they look like they do fine.
Right.
Maybe that's an ordinance, future ordinance revision suggestion.
Okay, a little bit of homework for staff. We have some homework. Pam, you were going to come back, maybe give some thought. And we'll all huddle again on the 20th if we get a vote here on the table. So without any further comment, all in favor of the motion to table, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I apologize, we pulled you out for 2 hours, but I believe that this discussion in the end turned out to be necessary, and it will be beneficial come the 20th, so.
You got your unanimous vote.
What's that?
You got your unanimous vote.
I did. Did you hear that? I got my unanimous vote.
Well done.
Oh, boy. All right, thank you all for your patience. That will close out plans and take us to reports. Tonight's agenda has, amongst a couple of pieces of correspondence, the manager's report. Does the manager have anything to add beyond what is in the report?
I just wanted to make one quick correction. I have nothing to add, but one quick correction under the Thompson Woods Preserve, the most current comment about meeting invites sent to Clearwater. That's supposed to be sent to Clearwater, and I was hoping to be able to do that yet next week. So they've not gone out yet, but we still have meetings that we need to hold with both CRPR as well as with Clearwater as we pursue this with the borough. So that was it, nothing additional.
Did we set deadlines to respond to those meeting invites?
Not yet, I haven't sent them out.
Oh, if maybe we could.
We'll work that in.
I just know how these things tend.
No, understood completely.
Especially this time of year. All right, questions for the manager? Okay, that concludes the manager's report. That takes us to COG Regional, County, and Liaison reports. By my calendar, there were 3 scheduled meetings since our last meeting. The first of which was a joint meeting between COG Parks Capital Committee, COG Finance Committee, COG Facilities Committee, and of course it did involve the Park and Rec Authority. That was December 9th. While Rich and I were both in attendance covering those 3 committees, I believe you all got the gist of what came out of that meeting in the follow-up email and the subsequent cancellation of the general forum. So, Rich, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I thought the joint meeting went exceptionally well. We weren't all in agreement, but I thought it proceeded well, and we got to a recommendation, and that moved forward to the exec and then some other discussions.
Yeah. And the recommendation did involve using some of the contingency funds for initial park elements. And that would have required a vote at general forum, vote, and that's why that failed. So ultimately, we dropped back to the option that doesn't require another vote.
Right, so what happened, the joint committees made the recommendation and went to exec kept it moving forward, but asked the members to report back the discussions from their meetings, and we had a consensus that should a member put forward that they would not support the recommended option, that then there was really no sense in having the general forum meeting because the unit voted that would not pass. So that's how we culminated in the cancellation of the general forum meeting scheduled for yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, just because you may hear this from other elected officials, it's probably important to note that the option that we, the joint committees, recommended was an option that included a practice field and more parking spaces. That was the difference between the recommended option and what we had to fall back on. I believe those were the big ones.
No, it didn't have the practice, we lost the practice field. The difference between the recommended option and the option that could move forward without general forum action was about 80 parking stalls.
It was just parking?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You didn't get the playing field back in until you went up to the 700,000.
But I thought we got the grading for it in that option.
It was already, it was actually in,
Okay.
yeah, in the
But
city there.
the rationale was that if we put those 80 parking spaces in now, they're going to be a heck of a lot cheaper than going back in 3 or 4 years and putting them in when we're inevitably going to need them.
Right.
But we had to do what we had to do to get the park moving. so.
Right. And interestingly, we referenced Millbrook Marsh and how you had to come back in and put additional parking in and to facilitate the good use of it. And that's what we hope for Whitehall Road too. But we're gonna have, celebration. This is a tremendous, momentous step forward in delivering a very overdue promise to the residents of the region.
Yeah, the big winners are the residents. So, questions for Rich or I? No? Okay. According to the schedule, then, Climate and Sustainability Action Committee was scheduled to meet on the 13th. Did they meet?
No,
Okay. Wasn't-
climate action and sustainability was canceled for the month of December.
Okay. And then Public Safety was scheduled to meet the next day. Did they meet?
It was canceled as well.
Okay. And then lastly, you then did have an exec committee meeting. No, I don't know if there's anything really to.
Well, I'll just share that we, over the past week, 2 weeks, we completed the executive director's review, and we reviewed that with him on the 15th. In general, it was very positive. And like all of us, he's got some things he could improve on. And I thought the process was clean, cordial, and everything. And he seemed satisfied with the results as well. So.
Eric, I did have a meeting,
Sure.
another one.
LTAC?
No, not LTAC. You forget the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, which is a little secret meeting I've been going to and reporting on now and then about garbage. So just to remind you all, not only does our garbage get picked up by the garbage trucks and go to the transfer station, but then after that, it goes to the landfill. Every 10 years, we have to have an agreement with the landfill, and we have to pay for that per ton, et cetera, et cetera. So we did put out RFP requests, and we got 3 responses at first, and then 1 dropped out. We did, as the committee, we did make a recommendation to the authority for one, which I do believe, according to our professional that we hired, it is a very challenging environment in the solid waste market right now to if you remember the recycling collapse that happened right before the pandemic. So it's all. He actually thought that our responses were pretty much as good as you're gonna get in what's going on. So we can just be quietly grateful for that. The price will go up. I mean, the price is higher than it was the last 10-year contract, so, but I think it's a swallowable amount. Anyway, so I just wanted to let you know that that is eking along quietly, but I think really well, so.
Any questions for Carla? All right, I see that Ed has left, so I don't know, Lindsay, do you have anything? Oh, before we move off Cod Committee Assignments, I'd like to give Rich and I the opportunity to just have a brief discussion on Cod Committee Assignments for 2022. Rich, did you have any specific questions? Or
Well, I did. So we consolidated PSEC and TLU, and we went from 2 reps to needing 1 rep in 2022. We just need to confirm who that is. And then also, there's a new committee standing up, the Parks Governance Committee. A little bit of discussion on that wouldn't hurt on whether we want that to be an elected, a staff, a resident. I'm thinking we're going to have a resident via the authority on the committee already. And we're trying to, well, when I proposed it originally, my goal was to make it a balance of elected and non-elected and have the authority represented well, because at the end of the day, it's their stuff. But the flexibility that I had built into it got taken away. But I can, only because of comments, I think there's gonna be some staff representatives from 2 of the other municipalities. So there's actually, it would probably benefit College and the committee to have an elected on the committee, unless Adam has any other thoughts about that.
No, I'm unaware of other municipalities' plans at this point. I think it makes a lot of sense. There need to be elected officials, at least represented.
Yeah.
However many, but certainly there needs to be at least 1.
I know there will be at least 1.
Understood.
I think that it would be good to have 2,
Maybe a few.
at least 2.
Maybe 3.
Or 3, yeah. So I think the biggest thing for expedience, if you could, the parks governance is gonna be a heavy lift. It's just straight up. At least initially and everything. So if you do or don't have an interest in that, if you could let me know in the next week. I did contact our new member, and he is perfectly comfortable trying to carry the heavy shoes of Mr. Fregola in his HR and IDA spots. But
will they be as nice?
Good point.
What's that?
Will they be as nice this year?
Nice issues, yeah. And
That's true.
we all know it. But if someone was looking to go in another direction in the Cod committees, then I think he would entertain some other ones. But he knows just starting out that could be the committees.
There's a lot of other stuff going on too.
Right. So I guess I would ask if you have interest in the Parks Governance Committee, Ad hoc Committee, or the Lucy Committee, please let me know, and then Jen and I will work to get those put together for our reorganization meeting.
I guess Carla and I decided that I would be the Lucy Committee representative. I've been doing that.
Okay.
And since it's the remnants of the TLU committee, I'm happy to continue on that. It dovetails nicely with MPL.
Okay.
As far as the ad hoc committee, is it anticipated that Parks Capital will continue in its current state and overlap this parks governance?
Parks Capital exists till it doesn't.
Yeah, because I know when we were working on the master plan, the idea was Parks Capital would be folded into a new authority. And now that wasn't the recommendation, but that was kind of the hope around the table, because
Well, yeah.
to be fair, the reason they were looking for elected officials, to recreate an authority that included elected officials, was to not have to need a Parks Capital Committee, because you would have that elected representation integrated into the board, so for the big finance decisions, you had the bill payer on the board. So the thought was Parks Capital would go away once the new structure. Now, that's just the general thinking of.
Right, but then that, again, it's way too preliminary on that, because, you know, there's some formats of the authorities that they're merely responsible for master plans. You know, and then all the financing stuff is on the agency. There's others where, you know, the municipalities make the, CATA would probably be an example, you know, that they contribute to the authority, and then that governing board deals with the decisions and things like that. So, yeah, there's a lot, and it's more, I say that with, I mean, if Whitehall's kicking off and that's completely under the auspice of the authority, what other regional parks do we have going on? You know, unless Parks Capital is gonna ramp up their fundraising efforts to fund these phase twos and everything like that, what is there?
There isn't any.
$700 and some $1,000 of funding.
Right, but but with that contingency money, I think there's two things. One, do you really wanna spend it before we've got Whitehall done, just in case? I don't think we're gonna touch it whatsoever. I think the authority and COG have done a good job making sure that there's enough contingency and allowance and whatnot money in there, that as in projects past, they won't be coming, hey, I need to finish the project. I would be very, very disappointed if that occurred this time.
That might be a hard sell.
It would be a very hard sell. But, and the other part, we were looking at that money is using maybe as the local match of a grant request. You know, that we could leverage it to get more stuff and everything, so, but.
Well, given that, my thought is that Dustin is coming from
Parks.
Rec. However, that would be
That's a heavy lift.
that's a big jump.
That's heavy.
From our local Parks and Rec committee to that. So if there isn't interest, and if Parks Capital is not going to meet, and already we're barely meeting quarterly, I'd be happy to stay on, I'd be happy to fill that at least temporarily, unless somebody else wanted to.
To fill what, sorry, Parks Capital?
Well, no, this, if there is
Oh, the
a
governance,
need,
okay.
that, it would, I think it would be a good fit for Dustin if he wasn't coming on new.
Sure.
You know, because of his interest, at least, in parks.
Sure.
But it may be a position, once the ad hoc committee reaches some kind of permanent arrangement, then we maybe reconsider that appointment. If that's the desire of the chair, if you can't find anybody to fill that, I would take that on. I'd be happy to take that on in lieu of the fact we're probably not going to meet for Parks Capital.
Got it. Okay. So you're not excluding yourself?
No.
Okay.
No.
That was, I took that away. Okay. But like I said, just over the next week, if you could, and then we'll.
I'm just worried about bandwidth myself.
Understood,
Yeah.
understood.
Which one, you're giving a.
I'm worried about
few area, huh?
bandwidth.
Yeah.
Just being able to do it justice, you know,
Yeah.
without giving something else up.
Right.
That's-
Yeah,
just need
and
to think
that
about it.
absolutely is important, because this is important.
Right, exactly.
We
No,
gotta
I
get it- we gotta get it
understand
right.
that, which is why
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah, no.
I just need to think about it.
Right.
I'd be very interested in doing it, I just don't know if I would do it justice, that's all.
Did you talk to Dustin about IDA? Because that's kind of a niche category too.
He indicated, again, that he would step into the Anthony's existing stuff, and everything. We could put Anthony to the Parks Governance, if he would consider it.
He sits quietly, very excited. He's right there.
Actually, that.
But yeah, I'll follow up with him on the idea, unless there's somebody here that has interest in assuming the idea. And again, don't need an answer this minute.
Okay.
Please, over the next week, we'll firm it up. We have till the beginning of January. When do we have to report it to COG? Right after the reorg? Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
That would conclude COG regional reports. As noted, we don't have a PC member here anymore, but Lindsay, did you have anything you wanted to add? I know PC met
Yes, we
since
met.
our last meeting.
We did meet and we discussed the draft, we presented a draft ordinance regarding historically significant areas in College Township. Prior to our meeting, Mark and I got together with Alan Popovich and came up with some language. It's going to be mostly an educational effort, but also we're considering adding historically significant properties to each use table in every zoning district as a conditional use. So if they do want to make any changes to those properties, as long as they can prove that it's on either the National Registry or a publication called A Remembrance of Things Past that was put together in 1982 by the Center Regional Planning Commission. That's our basis for what exists and what can be a conditional use. So we hope to get that in front of council here in January.
Questions for Lindsay?
Oh, I also submitted to the Planning Commission a guide to form-based code, and I believe Adam is going to share that with you here by the end of the week. So you'll be able to have the same information that the Planning Commission does for for our joint meeting coming up.
It hasn't been scheduled yet, right?
No, it has not.
Okay.
No, my intention is tomorrow to provide you with some of the webinar information as well as some of the written material that Lindsay has been supplementing to the Planning Commission so that you can begin to, at your own pace, on your own, to educate yourself about the concepts of form-based, which is exactly what the Planning Commission is working on at the moment. So you'll have that by the end of business tomorrow.
Carla?
Not about this, sorry. When this one's done, I have another committee I'm a part of that I forgot about.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
She has another committee report.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I apologize for my late entry here. Spring Creek Master Plan Study Group met yesterday. That's why I forgot, 'cause it was so recent. And we got our survey results back, which was really exciting. We had a great response, so maybe you remember the code things at the park, and I hope some of you took the survey. I didn't push it as much as I should have personally, but a lot of the other committee members apparently were doing their due diligence, and they did a great job. So we're just starting to dig through some of that. It will come before, actually Amy's on, she's doing a great job organizing this whole thing, but it'll come before council as a very broad direction concept before we go to a public meeting and get public input on some more refined ideas. We just want to hit council for quick high-level feedback, make sure we're heading in the right direction, and then we'll be narrowing things down towards more of a concept plan. Again, this is for the master plan of Spring Creek Park, so yeah,
That approach.
it's exciting.
Questions for Carla? Okay, well, then that would take us to staff, or other committee reports. Anybody on staff have anything we need updated on?
Yes, sir.
Lindsay, Mark, Adam? Okay, that would then conclude reports, take us to consent agenda, which is unusually light. I don't know what happened. Did we lose email for a week or what? No?
People are focused on other things right now, maybe.
Okay. Tonight's council agenda, the usual 3 sections, each includes 1 item. CA1 minutes includes the December 2nd, 2021 council meeting minutes. And Jen, the minutes in the supplemental, are they just an updated version of this? That isn't a second.
They didn't get put in their regular packets
Okay.
I wasn't finished with them, sorry.
So we have 1 set of minutes in CA1, the December 2nd, 2021 council meeting. And then under correspondence, we only have 1 item under CA2. CA2A is the letter from Tom Kulikowski dated December 3rd, 2021 regarding the Dale Cemetery. And under CA3 action items, we only have 1, that's CA3A, the resolution R-21-36, general obligation note reimbursement requisition number CFR 7. Anybody want to have any of these items pulled before we consider action on accepting them?
Move to approve the December 16th council consent agenda?
Second?
Second.
Second. Thank you, Carla. Discussion? None? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Consent agenda accepted. That concludes consent agenda, moves us to old business. Tonight we have 1 item under old business, OB1, the pedestrian master plan. Kind of concept discussion, not necessarily an action item. Mike, my understanding is I did read the memo. You've done us a big favor by bullet pointing out the areas that you would like to have feedback on tonight. So please take it away.
All right, so what I had in the memo, most of that applies, but it shifts a little bit. As I kind of foreshadowed, this thing is evolving by the day, and you'll see what I mean here shortly. So what's before you tonight is what I'm considering a 75% draft of the pedestrian facilities master plan, being termed Walkable College Township, trying to put a brand on it. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, 75% draft. It's broken down into 8 sections at the moment. An introduction, goal and objectives, existing regulations and programs, existing and future conditions, recommendations, implementation, conclusion, and appendices. This is basically me lifting a lot of what had been done in the previous sidewalk master plan, particularly in section 3, and dropping that in to build upon the great work that was done previously.
We'll go right after the presentation before we get to discussion.
So tonight, as I mentioned in the memo, certain sections are close to completion. Other sections are a work in progress. Consider this a working document and obviously a work in progress as it stands. So kind of where I deviate a little bit from the memo, and this will look familiar from the Dale Summit area plan, is I wanted to put some questions in front of council tonight to get a little bit of your direction. And really what we're looking for is to stay at the high level with this plan discussion tonight. And I'm seeking some confirmation from you as council members that the direction we're taking the plan is the direction that you envisioned and that is agreeable to you. So the first couple questions that we want to talk about tonight. The goal statement, which I'll show you in a minute. Do you agree with what the goal statement is trying to achieve? The objectives that kind of help define that goal statement, are they providing an adequate direction? As we'll kind of go into, if you've had a chance to break into the draft map or draft plan at all, there's an approach that we're utilizing now that has a series of progressive maps building upon each other to go from existing conditions to future conditions. Is that understandable? Is that a good approach? When we start to move towards the future conditions, that's where we start breaking this system down into 3 categories, a classification system. Your core system, which is your most critical, and you can kind of think of that as your regional movements. Your secondary system is kind of your intermunicipal movements. And finally, your feeder system or your inner neighborhood movements. We're looking to break the system down that way because it's important as we look towards an investment strategy moving forward in the future. And then finally, a term you're going to hear me talk about a lot tonight, and it's kind of the measure that we're shooting for with this plan, is using a neighborhood level equity of access an appropriate measure of effectiveness for the pedestrian facilities master plan. And I'll talk about each of these in a little bit more detail and then be seeking your feedback throughout the presentation. So the goal, if you could see it here, hold on one second. That helps. The goal that we have, that didn't even disappear.
It's also on page 3 for
Yeah.
those of us looking.
Thank you. It disappeared on my screen, but it didn't disappear. Is to provide an interconnected, continuous, and well-maintained network of sidewalks and shared use paths and other related facilities that provide all pedestrians, regardless of age and ability, with a safe and efficient access to numerous key destinations throughout College Township and the center region. I'm going to pause there for a second. That first question I asked, is that a workable goal? Is that what council would like to see? Thank you, Lindsay. In terms of the goal of this pedestrian master plan.
Thoughts? Paul?
Just a quick question. I mean, it's clunky, but to say something like human-powered transportation or something like that, because, you know, pedestrians just would almost seem to exclude bikes and scooters and, you know, just, so I know it'd be kind of clunky to say something like that. I'm just throwing that out there.
I hear what you're saying, though technically pedestrians includes bikes, right?
Yes, it could.
Well, I think it does when you're talking about this stuff, like if my Trish Meek voice is ringing clear in my head. And it's very clear because I just heard her yesterday, but not necessarily say this. I'm just
Well,
wondering if.
Maybe we could call that out, maybe. You
Yeah,
know,
call it out
I just
somewhere.
think, I think noting that
Right.
in some more clear way, because I'm thinking of,
No, I hear you for sure.
So a definition of pedestrian.
that would include human-powered
No.
Even if you
conveyance
said
of some
users, you
sort.
would
Yeah.
broaden the,
I'm sorry?
even if you replace pedestrians with users, you would broaden that scope to,
Yeah, but then you also, you know, they've got these like powered scooters and, I mean, we may be dealing with that here soon, or motorcycles.
but users is a different, it encompasses anybody who uses any of those things regardless of the mechanism.
Yeah.
Pedestrian defines a type of, anyways.
Yeah, very
Call
much.
it out.
And I completely hear that comment. I struggled with it, to be honest with you, as I was putting this plan, at least the draft of this plan together. This is, I think, an incremental step to eventually an active transportation plan. And what it does right now is it fills a void in our existing kind of planning structure that deals specifically with pedestrians. You have a center region bike plan that kind of brings the other piece of that puzzle together. At some point in the future, those two are going to meet, and I think it's going to become more of a, you know, regional active transportation plan. So I would consider this kind of a bridge document, but it's also an important one, particularly for College Township, because it helps us move the needle in terms of what you do from an ordinance standpoint with sidewalks and as you're looking at your development proposals that come forward in the future. So it's a progressive planning document that I think is going to eventually get where you want to go with it.
And it wasn't an objection, it was just an observation.
And again, I struggled with it, so I know exactly what you're asking.
But otherwise, I think it does accurately convey what we've been talking about, definitely.
Anthony, anything on the,
No, I think it captures what we're looking for, yes.
Carla?
I approve.
Rich?
Yeah, I like it. I like it.
You got a thumbs up?
I'll keep rolling. Objectives, as we start to break down that large kind of umbrella statement, we have 5 objectives that are put into the plan right now. The first is enhance safety. As a person with a transportation planning background, safety is always at the top of my list, and that was one of the things that I would emphasize here, is safety should be at the forefront of any decisions that council and planning commission, when you're evaluating things, are looking at. You need to look through that lens. And it goes as far down as maintenance of existing system, right up to the discussions like we had earlier tonight of what you're putting in there and is it safe for the end user. Second is expand connectivity, and this is to strive to develop pedestrian facilities that seamlessly connect to the feeder system, that inner neighborhood system, connecting that to the core system through whatever network it may be. That process starts by emphasizing that term, this theme's going to keep coming back, equity of access, to the core system. The third objective, improve accessibility. Pedestrian facilities should be designed in a manner that both attracts and accommodates users of all ages and abilities. Fourth, ensure proper maintenance. We do a pretty good job with this, in my opinion. Proper ongoing maintenance practices will ensure a longer life cycle, improve overall cost-benefit ratio. Maintenance practices and policies, we need to make sure that we're viewing those through the lens of users' ability as well as necessity of use. And again, that gets back to that access discussion. And last, we wouldn't be good stewards of funds if we didn't look for opportunities to leverage both private and public funds to have a bigger bang for the buck, essentially. Particularly when we're using taxpayer revenue, that we're putting those dollars on the street. If we're able to leverage more dollars to do more complete projects, all the better. So that's an aspirational goal as part of this kind of larger umbrella. Again, I'm going to stop there. I gave you 5. Do they make sense? Am I missing anything? What are thoughts around the table?
All right, we'll start again on this side, Paul.
No, I think it's very complete. The only thing that popped into my head when I was reading this was maybe adding sustainability to proper maintenance, because, I'm just thinking about this almost like from the standpoint of a capital improvement plan. We're gonna need to plan for ongoing investments. It's not just one and done.
Good stuff. Thanks, Paul.
Anthony?
When I read that last one, and when we say private investments, and if we just want to keep it generic like that, I think it's great. But like when we look at private investments, and we'll say more recently when we looked at the development here on Hilltop, and we have a private investment or money's committed, can we somehow include in that, or would it have to be in the ordinance change on private investments like a fee in lieu for sidewalk waivers?
Yeah, and you'll see that it's not something that we'll get into great detail tonight, but one of the recommendations in the back end of the plan is a fee in lieu. And we start boiling that down to even hard and fast numbers. Kind of trying to keep it in its own lane, but there is a recommendation in there.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Carla? 5 objectives?
Yeah, no, the objectives look good to me. I guess, yeah, I really like the improved accessibility, and I was thinking maybe we could work something about health of the community into there.
Yep. Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Okay. That's it.
Rich?
No, Mike, I love the way you eat the elephant. I agree with Paul's comment on sustainability and the maintenance side. A general theme of delivering the best value to our residents. Value not being the least cost alternative, but providing the greatest value to them. The health is a nice touch on in there as well. Totally off topic. I have to give Mike props. I broke out my inner Mike when we were building the Whitehall Road regional park options and stuff. And I went with option number 5, do nothing. And I totally told them you were coming with that to COP.
I noticed that.
Thanks.
Stood out.
Setting that stage well, thank you, Rich.
An option. Can you go back a screen, Mike?
Sure.
I'm sorry, one more.
Yep.
Under expand connectivity, we're referencing the term feeder system and core system. Are we referring to the 3 levels that you're going to talk about later?
Yeah, and again, just think about it in this way. That feeder system is your basic, get you out of your house and onto your sidewalk.
I understand.
And then connective, you're going from network to network, and then core is kind of more of a transportation corridor.
So we're talking about the equivalent of local streets, collector streets, and arterials.
Like the
Only
way you
pedestrian.
think, exactly.
Okay.
I just didn't want to use those terms.
Well, no, but it makes all the sense in the world to use it here for the same reasons it does in
Right.
roads, streets and
Yeah,
roads.
and in the plan, again, I'm still kind of hanging meat on the bones with the plan, but you'll see I kind of relate that system to a watershed.
Right,
The
I
feeder
was
system is
actually
your
gonna ask,
headwaters.
should you go the other route?
Yeah,
Well, my question here is, we're not really talking about connecting feeders to cores, we're talking about developing feeders and cores. Or, so should it say, using a feeder/core system to seamlessly connect people to the destinations?
yeah,
Because if you read this literally, it just talks about the middle piece.
right.
It talks about developing something that connects feeders and cores, and what we're really talking about is feeders and cores and everything in between.
Secondary is what I see here. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, what's the middle term?
Secondary.
Yeah. So if you're, literally, we're just talking about developing secondary, if you read that.
Yep, no,
But
that's,
what we really want is all three.
that's fine,
And
yeah.
we want to develop all three to make the needed connections to the destination.
I see the point, I can wordsmith that, that's not a problem.
That's all I had, it might be just semantics here.
All right. We good, I'll keep rolling. Okay, mapping. And this is gonna be hard to see on the screen, I can already see that, so.
Should we turn the lights down?
Yeah, we can, which one is it?
Third from the bottom.
Turn them off.
No, I don't know.
That help a little bit?
Let me do this, you'll know I'm in trouble.
All right.
I was watching over there too.
So, so as I talked about in the intro, the way this map is developing, it's a series of progressive maps building on themselves to go from existing to future conditions. So the first map you see is your existing conditions, and that's your baseline system. Provides the location of the sidewalks and paths, your transit stops, and parcels where sidewalk waivers, to our earlier discussion, were granted in the past, and that shows up really bad. That's your basic plan there. I'm going to give you something at the end that's even better, and it's going to help you with this, but for the purposes of this presentation, I'll keep rolling. But that's what shows up here, is just some indication of the existing system as it stands today, unimproved. The next piece is priority corridors. If you remember back to the discussion of the sidewalk master plan in 2018, the planner at that time, Mark Holdren, called out priority corridors. As we looked at this plan, and particularly as we started getting the public input back, it just put an exclamation point on that earlier work. So I can't improve on what Mark had done there. So we're going to recommend that you carry the same priority corridors forward. And again, it's tied back to those 9 routes that show up there on the screen. And that is shown graphically in the next map. It's a little hard to see again, highlighted in red are your priority corridors where you need to be looking at in terms of investments in pedestrian facilities. What also is shown on this map, and it's a little clearer to see, is that kind of yellow indication. Working with Shane, our GIS, who I would be remiss if I didn't tip my cap to that guy, because he cranks out maps like nobody's business. He put together a gap analysis. So the easiest way to describe this is everything you see in yellow is well connected, and the pieces in between, that's your gaps. You can't get from point A to point B in a lot of those instances, and what we're going to try to achieve is making some connectivity between in those gaps.
Mike, real quick, and I know that my question is there any chance that the website would show up better here?
I think it's a projector issue
Yeah,
more
it
than
definitely
anything. It just washes out bad on the
Turn
projector.
that computer around and open it so that they can see at least what.
Well, we have it, don't we?
Yes,
Yeah, it's
Can
in
you
here.
all
Yeah.
see it on yours?
Page
It's the
15.
projector.
I do think.
Projector.
I made
I'll get there real
That's
quick.
fine.
Yeah, no, I'll
So
get there real
the people
quick
at home
with the.
probably see it okay too.
Yeah, I'll get there real quick
No, they don't.
with the website. So
Never mind.
They're seeing
I'm sorry.
it may help. No, it's a great thought. I don't think it's going to make much difference, honestly. So those first 2 maps really dealt with existing conditions. What's there, kind of what the issues with the connectivity are currently and what those primary corridors were. It was just kind of echoed with the demand that we got from the public that said, you know, look at these corridors, and they correspond directly with the priority corridors. 25% of all the comments we received were in the East College Avenue corridor. 22% were in and around Lamont, particularly Pike and Elmwood streets. 14% Branch Road corridor. 10% were in the Hauserville area, including Hauserville Road and Puddintown. A lot of it was trying to get access to the school. And 6% were around Dale Summit, and that deals with Benner Pike, College Ave, and Shiloh, that kind of V that we deal with out there at Dale Summit. So no surprises there, but it just, like I said, put it the exclamation point. What Shane did was a heat map to kind of emphasize that. So where you see that dark purple start popping out on the screen, it doesn't really show up out in Dale Summit so much. But anywhere you see the dark purple is telling you there's a lot of interest in some type of facility expansion in those areas. And again, that just emphasized those priority corridors that we talked about. So getting to network classification, moving that next step up the ladder. This is where we're talking about breaking down the overall system into classifications. The core system, those are your highest pedestrian volume areas and are likely used as or part of the user's commute between destinations. So this is where they're basically trying to travel throughout the center region, and these are the corridors that they're using. The secondary pedestrian facilities, this is that intermunicipal connectivity. These are the kind of connective tissue of your network, and honestly, maybe the most important in some aspects, because it's linking that core system back to that feeder system, that discussion we had. So they provide linkages between neighborhoods and linkages between the existing systems. And then finally, as I mentioned, the feeder system is your inter-neighborhood connectivity. It's typically your lower volume usage, and primarily it's people circulating within a neighborhood to go from house to house and or house to a park, those kind of connections. Building on that theme is that equity of access theme that you keep hearing from me. And why that's important is we're looking at that as an initial measure to help us achieve the goal. We know we're not going to be able, Rich, to steal your term, to eat the elephant in one bite. So we need some type of measure of effectiveness to get us those incremental steps towards the big picture. And what equity of access is it's an evaluation of how well a neighborhood is either well-served or underserved in terms of its connection to that core pedestrian facilities. Well-served communities can have a varying degree of access. Some will be very well connected if they're interwoven between some of those core facilities. Others may only be bypassed by one. But if they make some type of connection with that core facility, we consider it well-served. And what the plan is going to try to do is raise all those ships. So everything that shows up as an underserved neighborhood, we're trying to bring them up to at least the level of the lowest well-served neighborhood within College Township, to make sure that they have some level of accessibility to the core facilities to be able to make those larger regional movements if they choose to do so. So what shows up here is an existing condition with some of that overlay in there. So you can see the red, the yellow, and the blue. Red is your core system, going back to those priority corridors that we talked about. That's what's out there currently in terms of that more regional connectivity. The yellow are what we're considering as secondary system connections, and then the blue are your neighborhood connections. So as you look at that, you can see that there's obviously a lot that's missing. But also here is a color coding of blue and red. Anything that's blue is considered a well-served community. Again, it could be a varying degree of well-served, but it's well-served because it has some direct connection to a core facility. Anything that's in red is considered lacking a direct connection to a core facility, and we're trying to bridge that gap with this plan. So your draft plan that we provided you as part of this agenda, stop there. But I do have more to share in just a moment. But revisiting those questions that we had at the beginning, I heard consensus around the goal statement. You provided some great feedback on the objectives and the direction that they're headed. These last 3 questions relate to the mapping so far. That approach that we're using of that series of progressive mappings building on each other, is that adequate? Does that make sense? Understandable to everybody?
I'm seeing heads nodding.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. Do you agree with the classification system? And we can tweak those terms. You're not going to hurt my feelings. It's just what I came up with as I was thinking through it. Do you agree with breaking that classification system in concept, the core, secondary, and feeder?
Yes.
Okay. And the last piece.
If you find nicer words.
I'll work on it.
Yeah.
I'll work on it. The last piece, that theme that I kept talking about, the equity of access, trying to raise all those underserved communities up to well-served. Does that make sense as a measure of effectiveness of the plan?
My only comment on that, and looking at it, was it's not necessarily binary. I mean, I think there might be degrees.
Yep.
I know, not to split too fine a hair on
Sure.
it, but, you know, it might have access from one end,
Right.
but not from the other. You know, like, I think there's degrees.
Yeah. And I would agree wholeheartedly with you, Paul, that, you know, it would be nice to be able to say everybody's going to be at the highest level of well-served. But you're right, there's shades of gray. And all of them.
And I'm not trying to overcomplicate it, but it's just, it's a recognition, and
Sure.
maybe we could just recognize that,
Yeah.
or again, even put that in the,
Yep, I can definitely build that
as a
into the narrative.
recognition.
As, you know, we're probably overgeneralizing it, but there are opportunities to, you know, be partially well-served and,
Yeah.
you know, varying degrees of access.
I'm just looking at, you know, the, right off the bike path, right? It's sort of the Daleview area, right? It's, you know, it's blue all the way across. Well, on the back end, maybe not so much. I mean, you can get there, but it isn't necessarily easy to walk from one end to the other. I mean, if you're right along the bike path, yeah, you have great access.
Or if you live on Branch Road,
Or if,
Yeah.
yeah,
there's
exactly.
a whole strip there that's not.
Yeah,
yeah.
that, good point, yeah. That strip right there is,
And-
having walked that.
At its basic level, what the thought process was, and again, it's not, well-served is probably a bad term, is in that neighborhood in particular, just thinking it through, you're looking at low-volume roads. So you at least have some level of opportunity to get to the bike path. There's some of those developments are on an island, and you're never going to get there.
Well, and to Carlos' point, Branch Road is not one of those.
Sure, and you'll see that in a minute as to what we're talking about, but.
Overall, I think it's great, and please don't take any of this as a criticism.
Oh, I am
This is
not.
just-
I am not.
Why we're here.
Yep, I'm, you know, your feedback makes this better, so that's what I'm looking for. But in general, those 3, I thought I saw head nods around the table. Okay. All right, so in terms of next steps, and again, I'm just keeping you at the high level, and so far I've heard no red flags, no game-changing, you know, issues. Council, I'm going to ask you to continue to review the draft plan. You know, I'm keeping you at the high level now, but we're going to get ourselves into the weeds in January. And the plan is in early January to start having that discussion in more detail. And I'm going to be giving you more information. So again, this is evolving as we have these discussions. The goal that I'm shooting for is 100% draft plan delivered to council before my clock runs out here. So at the January 20th meeting, I hope to be presenting you with a 100% draft plan for your consideration to do with as you please. You know, most likely at that point, do make a remand on the Planning Commission to get their 2 cents, but that's the goal that I'm aiming for. So there's going to be a lot of work happening between now and January 20. And one more thing. So any questions on that before I do my one more thing?
Well, before we get off to January 20th, any suggestions for Mike on the format for the 20th? Were we going to get the whole thing on the 20th and expect to go from 30,000-foot view to the weeds, or are we going to get an incremental step in between?
My goal was to give you something incremental in between.
Okay.
I mean, it's going to be a quick turnaround. but you'll see I'm already there with some of the increments. So I'm giving you a Christmas present and homework at the same time tonight. You're going to have something to review over the holidays in advance of our next meeting. So.
Rich?
Well, I guess I opened my gift too early.
You missed my sticker on it.
Yeah, I did. Just a thought, suggestion maybe. The official map dialogue that you start on page 8.
Yep.
Probably, I mean, the official map's one of our biggest tools, so I'm thinking it could go up higher.
Okay.
And then all your figure 2 list of sidewalk waivers granted, cite the total, but then throw the detail into appendix like you did with the other stuff.
Sure.
And then the rest of it seems to flow good together.
All right. Not a problem.
So what's the other thing?
Hold on one second. I'll get my note here.
Are you planning
Have
to
we
leave
been
or
naughty
something?
or nice this year? I mean, that's really good.
Well, it
It's a
depends
real
how they
Steve
take what I do
Jobs
next.
kind of,
So give me 1 second here, and I'm going to share something different. So you know that I can't speak highly enough of Mr. Adams downstairs, and Mr. Adam again works his magic. So what I'll be providing to you outside of this meeting is a website. So we couldn't really talk about those maps in a whole lot of detail tonight. Shane has taken all the maps that we have to date and compiled them into a website that's going to allow you to zoom in and out and take some time to really digest what's there.
But he has a picture of the borough on the homepage of the website.
Yeah,
That's our future path.
Yeah.
it's still in college at that point.
That's the path to campus.
But it's in the borough.
No, it's not. That's college.
Not that part.
Okay, all right.
We're looking into the borough.
That's our center firm. It better not be in the borough.
Say, how's that in the borough?
The guy that's lived here all his life got lost.
So what's here again are all those maps that we just talked about.
Nice.
There's the existing conditions, there's the existing connectivity and the gap analysis. There's the input. This is the input a little bit more results with the existing facilities. You'll see all the red lines that you remember from the mapping document. Here's that classification and neighborhood designation that we just showed. And here's the one more thing.
Drum roll, please.
So, there's that map we just talked about with the existing conditions and classifications of neighborhood. And this is staff's first attempt.
Dun, dun.
There's your core facility related to those primary corridors. Starting to put together our secondary network. And then we also, recognizing, and it's not on there yet, but it will be in time, there are barriers, and obvious barriers, some that we can still get past and some that are insurmountable. So we did throw a couple potential greenways in there as well to try to circumnavigate around some of those barriers. This is really one of the ones I want you to take some time and digest. And look at, see what we're doing, and again, it goes back to that concept of, does it make sense from classification levels and in terms of making those interconnectivity into neighborhoods and trying to raise that level of service in each of the neighborhoods to get to at least a base level of well-served for each of the neighborhoods that's out there. You'll see the Penn State area is kind of its own little void. We didn't want to presume that we would be able to do a whole lot on Penn State land. But certainly if there's opportunities for us to collaborate with Penn State, we'll investigate those. But this will come to you in an email, probably tonight at some point. This is your holiday homework. I'm going to, again, ask you to take a little time, particularly this map, and digest it. And that series of maps building to this point. If you think this makes sense or there's things you want to see us add, that's a discussion that we want to have in January as we continue to build out this plan with that goal of 100% plan on the 20th. So that's what I have for you tonight. I appreciate your patience as we walk through it. But I couldn't ask for a better segue than the 2 hours we spent at the first part of the meeting. because that was exactly what that's the kind of level of discussion that this is starting to move towards.
The segue didn't have to be 2 hours, but it was. General questions for Mike before we let him go? Paul?
Can I ask just a real quick question? I love the greenway thing in the end because there are those barriers. Maybe integrating into the report some of those, just so that they're there, so that they're documented
Yep.
in a sense, like
Yeah,
these
those-
are, because we're looking at these like, here's the potential, but we know it, for example, like the stone, the narrowness of College Avenue, once you cross over, I mean, you've got
Yeah.
really limited space between the road and a pretty steep slope. Those are the kinds of things that I think,
Yeah, and again, as I said, this is kind of an evolving document. When we come back and have more time with Shane, we're going to give you another map that shows this with the barriers.
yeah.
And how we're trying to work around the barriers. And again, we're going back to my relation of a watershed. Think about how water flows. If there is a dam in the stream, it's going to find its path of least resistance, and that's what we're going to try to do with this plan.
Yeah, I like that approach. I think that's really good.
So this is going to continue to change, but at the bare minimum, I'd like you to spend some time with this map in particular and let us know if that makes sense to you. And we recognize some of the things we put on there are heavy lifts. But again, to Rich's earlier comment, you can't eat the elephant in one bite. You got to do it incrementally. And I will tell you, the greenway corridors that show up there, they came to us late. This map just was developed yesterday, and Shane put this together today. So it's not referenced in the draft document that you got, but it will be in the final document.
Very cool.
Admit you've had fun while you've been here.
I've had fun while I've been there, absolutely. And I'm going to have more fun between now and the 28th. So.
It shows. This is awesome.
Hey, just a heads up to CNAT, we're going to take a 5-minute recess as soon as this discussion ends on this item. Anybody else?
Thanks, Mike.
Anthony?
Thank you.
Carla? Anything, Adam, you want to add?
Staff's done a great job. I mean, Mike, Shane, but Lindsay's been very much involved in this. It's been a good team effort. There's been a lot of dialogue and debate, and it's come together very nicely. This is, in my opinion, having lived this entire life with the sidewalk and now the pedestrian facilities master plan, to me, this is the culmination of all the things that we're trying to do. And many of those things are referenced in Mike's 75% plan now. And he's already indicated there's going to be more meat on the bone. That's going to be the roadmap about how we get to this. But this is what has always been lacking in terms of our vision, our discussion about what are we trying to achieve. I think we've all known it intrinsically, but I think this is the first time there's been a visual representation of it, and that's why you really need to spend some time with it. And hopefully we'll be able to provide those additional explanations about why there are certain things that aren't showing up here. And why those greenways are there instead or in place. So again, I think it's a tremendous effort, great work, and please review. That's it.
Well said. Thank you, Mike, Lindsay, and everybody that was involved. Look forward to tackling this. And at this point, we are in recess. We will reconvene at 9:58.
The recess counts towards this too.
I was standing there and I didn't remember.
All right.
Sorry.
Are we good in the back?
I'm gonna leave that.
Okay. Reconvening the Thursday, December 16, 2021 College Township Council, regular council meeting. Where we left off, we had concluded old business. We are now on to new business. There are 3 items, agenda items under new business tonight, the first of which is NB1. It's the Center Region COG Budget, Resolution R-21-33. This is an action item that requires approval from this council. But before I entertain a motion, Adam, I believe you have a little bit of a report for us, or a little bit of an update on where we're at?
Actually, no, the only thing that I have to say is just a reiteration. This is essentially an action to approve the 2022 COG budget, as was discussed and referred at the COG meeting on November 22nd.
Okay, and there's very few changes, there's really no significant changes from where we left off in our discussion on the budget 2 meetings ago? 3
Sure.
meetings? 3 meetings? Would that be correct, Rich?
Yes.
Okay. So any questions for staff on the agenda item before I consider a motion?
Well, the item references a resolution. Do we have that?
Yeah.
Or do we just need a motion
I
approving?
thought Bob said, I guess I was thinking that was in the packet. I have it. Do you want to see it? I would, here, I have you. look.
Yeah, here, if you just give that to me, Jen.
I think all we got was the follow-up to the COG meeting.
The resolution's not in the packet.
Right,
Oh,
right,
sorry about
right,
that.
right. That's
Yeah,
fine.
that's
fine.
that was-
But yeah, there's no, the only feedback that I've gotten, I heard that there was a comment made at Harris Township regarding studies and cash flow, basically. My interpretation of it was that that is more of a process and procedure discussion than an approval, budget approval issue. They had no problems with the numbers that was used, it was the money flow. And that's good for all of us. And COG has shown, I think it was Millbrook,
Right.
you know, they adjusted the money flow to follow the project, and that's a good policy regardless. So I imagine finance will take that up in 2022.
So resolution R-21-33 to adopt the 2022 COG budget, whereas now therefore be it resolved that the Council of College Township approves the Center Region Council of Governments 2022 budget in the amount of $28,687,802, with the local shares equaling $7,952,860, with College Township share not to exceed $1,299,417.
Okay, so do we have a motion to adopt the resolution as noted as described by the manager?
So moved?
Okay, I got a motion, appropriately enough from our finance guy, and a second from Paul. Any discussion on the motion? I have nobody in the room. I have nobody online. Therefore, if there isn't any further comment from the table here, I'll call for a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 1.3 million to COG for next year. All right, that concludes NB1. That takes us to NB2, titled Opioid Settlement. I got to tell you, when the draft agenda came out, that one did catch my attention. Adam, anything to add beyond what is in the memo tonight?
No, just a very quick synopsis. This all relates to the national opioid settlement agreement that was reached with multiple states exceeding $850 million. This pertains to our ability to participate in Pennsylvania's share of that amount of money, which is as of yet to be determined what will be available locally. I have additional information that is not in the memo, is that the Pennsylvania program will be working through and under the auspices of all of the individual counties within the Commonwealth. And so it's important for all the municipalities that are eligible to participate and those are municipalities with more than 10,000 population, to in fact opt in for participation so that the state money can flow to the county so that it can then be distributed to individual municipalities, or there can be a sharing of or pooling of funds to advance county initiatives. So that's what this is about. This basically gives the ability for the manager to execute the documents allowing us to opt in and any additional documents related to the opioid settlement. I've attached the eligible expenditures based on the settlement agreement for which the money can be used for. None of the things that have been identified here are things that we as College Township do directly. We may do those, some things through, for example, our police contract with the State College Borough Police Department. But beyond that type of a relationship, none of these activities are actually performed by College Township. So the expectation is that we will make available any funds that we happen to receive to the appropriate entity that will be able to use these funds in this capacity. So that's everything I had, and
Okay. This could be a discussion item, however, if we want to opt in, it appears that action would be more appropriate. So, questions for the manager before we consider a motion?
I have one.
Carla?
It's not necessarily related to the motion. I'm just wondering if you know why it's limited to larger municipalities?
I do not.
Do the smaller municipalities have any?
Again, because a lot of these funds are going to be run through the various county.
Okay.
That's my only, and it's a guess. I honestly don't know, but the
Right, I
counties
just found that very
have.
odd.
This has been very difficult to get a lot of information, virtually any information on. Much of what I provided you in the packet was pulled from press releases. We were contacted, or we made contact with the Attorney General's office. There's virtually no information on the website about this, but we did in fact confirm that municipalities in excess of 10,000 are eligible. We had a question about what census data was being used,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. We tripped the threshold. And that was confirmed by the Attorney General's office. But beyond that, I just simply don't have a lot of details. I did happen to speak with the county administrator yesterday, who did indicate that she does have some additional detail, but I've yet to receive that. So once I have it, I can provide that going forward.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Other questions? If not, at this point, I'll consider a motion to participate in the opiate settlement agreement.
Mr. Chair, I move to participate in Pennsylvania opioid settlement agreement and to authorize the township manager to execute any requirements as deemed necessary by the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office to enroll and comply with the terms of the settlement.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Seconded by Carla. Any question on the motion? Again, I see no public participants remotely or in the room. So if there's no question on the motion, is there no question on the motion? I'll call for a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Adam, for cobbling together enough information to allow us to take action tonight. And that takes us to the third item under new business, NB3, personnel, position modification.
Yes, with the advent of our departure of our current management analyst, Mr. Bloom, I am... Can't leave until the facilities master plan is done. The pedestrian facilities master plan. But I'm actually requesting council consider the creation of the position of assistant township manager. And while many of the job functions that are envisioned for this new position to the township are identical to the management analyst position, there are several key areas that I would like to establish as part of the job description for this new position. And essentially, I would like to see us have a position where the individual employed is responsible for community communications and engagement, information technology, diversity, equity, and inclusion, strategic planning, and sustainability initiatives. Some of those would be, all of those would be the portfolio that the individual would carry forward within this position. In addition to that, there would be other duties as assigned, which Mike at the moment is all too familiar with. Although I will say those categories that I've just mentioned, many of those are things that Mike has been fulfilling in his capacity as management analyst. The time has come, the level of talent, we have been extremely fortunate to have Mr. Bloom and Mr. Fronick before him in the capacity of management analysts, but I don't foresee our ability to attract the level of talent that is needed for this position by maintaining the existing management analyst position to be utilized in this capacity. And so that is my recommendation to council. I've also provided a recommendation for a salary range for this position, and I'm ready, willing, and able to answer any questions the council may have.
Questions for Adam before we consider a motion? Let's start with Carlo this time.
I have no questions, thank you.
And let's go to Rich next.
No questions? Mike, you spoiled us.
Yeah, Anthony?
No questions, thank you.
Paul?
Set the bar pretty high. No, I agree.
Yeah. Way to go. By the way, those were not blooms you were hearing, those were actual boos.
Yeah, I know.
So you're not mistaken.
I remember when you need money to implement the pedestrian facility.
That's, that's on record.
We've got at least one more meeting with you. All right, if there is no question, and this is, the manager's requesting this to be in the action form as it should be, the chair will consider a motion then to create this position. Any takers?
HR guy.
Well, can I make a comment before we do it, or should I wait?
Would it be on the motion, or?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
actually.
We don't have a motion, so go ahead.
Right, so that's kind of why I want to do it ahead of time. I think some of the language should be able to be flexible. It's just because we're saying, as described within the draft job description, does that mean that it's locked in once the motion's made? Okay.
Now, the job descriptions are basically, the position itself with the salary range is the key for College Township Council. The job descriptions are administratively modified as necessary.
Great, okay, that's all, I just want to make sure, thanks.
So to answer your question, any motion tonight is not committing word for word to the draft job description in the, okay.
That's correct.
Cool.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, exactly, thank you.
Okay, at this point, anybody want to take a stab at a motion?
I'll make it. I move to create the position of Assistant Township Manager as described within the draft Assistant Township Manager job description and set the salary range for this position at $77,693 to $101,107.
We have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Rich, any question on the motion? Okay, again, I don't have anybody in the room, I don't have any public online, so we're not going to open it up for comment. Instead, we'll go right to a vote. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
That concludes new business. That takes us to staff informatives. There are some items in the packet. Anything that staff needs to expand on from what's in the package?
Just a recognition that the 2021 adopted PSATS resolutions are there for your further inspection.
Hey, speaking of PSATs, I noticed that registration opens on the 11th. We're not having a full-blown meeting, a regular meeting before then. Do you need anything from us in the interim? Or you
Well,
just
we are
gonna,
having January 3rd meeting.
but that's a reorg meeting.
Well, it's.
And a regular meeting
Typically,
after.
it's a combo meeting.
Okay.
We do the reorg first, then we actually flow, if there is business, and there will be,
Okay,
to flow into the 3rd.
I got you. All right, any questions for staff on what they're informing us on in the packet? No? Okay, then we'll move on to council, staff, and other matters. Anybody on council? Anything that we haven't covered tonight? We can stretch this out to 10:30 if we try. Rich?
No, just you,
No?
yeah.
Staff,
Just your
anything
stuff.
else? No. Well, I'll be darned, that takes us to adjournment then.
No,
Other matter,
I'm sorry, what?
other matter.
Oh, thank you. We are not done with other matters. I have 2 certificates of service here to present to one of our members of council who unfortunately couldn't join us in our official appreciation ceremony. So what I'd like to do is read these into the record. And the first one is a certificate of appreciation. This certificate is awarded to Anthony Pergola in grateful recognition of dedicated, loyal service on the College Township Council, Township of College, Center County, Pennsylvania, from January 2nd, 2018 to December 31st, 2021. And before I present that, I'd like to read the second one, which is, this is certificate of service hereby presented to Anthony Pergola in recognition of your May 31st, 2016 to January 2nd, 2022 of service as a council member to College Township, Center County. We commend you for your selfless dedication to your community and local government, as well as your leadership, commitment, and passion for serving your fellow citizens. And this certificate is presented by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, December 2021. It is also signed by the President, Marvin Meter, and the Executive Director of PSATS, I believe he's Executive Director of PSATS, David Sanko. So what this is a recognition of Anthony's full-length term of service here, along with certificate of appreciation for the 4-year term that concludes in January. So on behalf of the
Thank you. It's
Anything?
appreciated. And as noted before, or as noted in my statement, unfortunately, I couldn't attend the appreciation dinner, but it has been a pleasure working with this council and an honor working with this council. I think we have great discussions, though lengthy. They're good discussions, and overall, it's for the benefit of the township. I also want to thank staff for what it is that they do to assist us in what we do. So thank you, and thanks again. It was a pleasure, and I'd be glad to support this council in the future. Thank you.
Okay, you know, we may take you up on that.
Sooner than later.
Careful what you wish for.
That's right. Yes, I think I could speak for all the council to say the feelings here are mutual. The gratitude and respect is mutual, so.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I think now we can move to adjournment? Did I forget anything else? No? Outstanding. All right. Who's going to move to adjourn?
He does.
So moved.
Anthony. I don't need a second here. We are hereby adjourned.